I'm Anthony Matarese Jr. I'm from Pennsville, New Jersey in the United States of America. I'm a professional sporting clay shooter and professional instructor. I've grown up doing that really my whole life. I'm really excited to be here with 28-time world champion George Digweed. And in my lifetime of shooting, I've got to watch his performances. It's been unbelievable, and we really want to dig in and understand more. And I'm going to be interviewing him and asking him a lot of questions, and we're going to be out on the range shooting. It's going to be really exciting, but really what we want to provide to everyone, myself really, I have a little bit of a self-interest here, is I want to learn more. I want to learn more about what makes this guy tick, what makes him great. And we're really going to be diving into asking a lot of great questions about what makes George Digweed George Digweed. The guy, his resume speaks for itself. I've watched his performances really over my lifetime of shooting, starting as a young boy growing up, and I don't think we've ever asked him the right questions. I don't think we've gotten to the bottom of maybe what makes him as good as he is. And I'm really excited both as a shooter, an instructor, and being able to provide content and information to really everyone across the world about what makes George as good as he is, from mental strategies to techniques. And let's get his history and kind of understand more about him. I think you have to understand the big picture if you're going to learn from it. I'm not really someone who thinks that someone is great at something just because, or they're born that way. So there has to be more to it, and I want to figure out what that is, and I want to provide that information to you. I'm really excited. George, thanks for being here with me.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Look, it's when you came up with the scenario of me coming over and doing something together and that sort of thing, you're never too old to learn, and I'm as much of intrigue to come over and shoot with you and see how you guys do it over here.
Yeah, so the interesting thing, when I've got the idea, I did some shooting videos before. It's just, I want to learn more, right? The interesting thing about George Digweed is I don't think there's ever, about yourself, George Digweed, I don't think there's ever been anyone to kind of really ask you the right questions. So what we're here to do is we're going to go through and provide some great questions and answers and go through, and then we're going to be also creating some other content, instructional videos, etc. So just to jump into it, I want to kind of get some things behind us, George, and ask you just some personal questions. What year were you born? How old are you?
Born 21st of April 1964 in Hastings, England, and have gone through life from there, really.
So that makes you what, 59 now?
59, yeah.
Okay. Give us a little bit of your married. Your wife's name's Kate, right?
Married with Kate. Two Labradors and a Spaniel,
okay,
as children, which take up probably more time than most children. And yeah, born into a butchering family. So the family business was butchery. It was established in 1860. At one stage, the family had 8 shops and 3 slaughterhouses, and then rapidly diminished through war times and that sort of thing. And with the advent of supermarkets and outside retailing businesses, the private business, so to speak, went to the sword for a little bit. Although it's coming back now, people want clarity of where meats come from and that sort of thing. But I got out of the business in '93. Unfortunately, I lost my father and my grandfather. Grandfather was an integral part of the business, and father worked at the business in '92, just before a chemo, and it was one of those decisions that we carried on through until '93, and it was just mother and myself, and she'd never had any time to herself, and I decided that, having won a few world championships by then, if I couldn't try and earn a living from shooting, then there was no real point in going shooting. So I tried to earn a living from it. I had some very good help and some very good advice along the way from a former England rugby player who's no longer with us, a guy called Tony Horton. And it set me on my way, and I've been supported incredibly well by a few people within the industry. And I hope to think that I've repaid their loyalty by producing what I've done.
Made a career out of it. So that kind of takes us to, you know, making a career out of shooting. Let's back up a, you know, let's back up a step and, you know, make sure we don't leave any integral parts of, you know, I really want to ask you everything about your history. So walk us through getting started with shooting, whether it was shooting game or shooting clays or skeet, and kind of just walk us through from the kind of the beginning to when you would consider yourself a, you know, you say in say 93 you became a professional shooter. So at one point you were a kid shooting and learning to shoot, obviously with your grandfather or father, and then at 1993 you became a professional shooter. So you have a lot of kind of leaps through there and changes from getting from that point. Like, just kind of walk us through there, and if you don't mind, I'll interrupt you if you know, I kind of have a question that I want to ask at that point.
I started off with an air rifle, as most kids do, and would, you know, almost try and replicate field sports in the garden. So you'd try and decoy starlings in and shoot starlings with an air rifle, and lie under a tree and wait for a pigeon to come and sit in the tree and that sort of thing. And then, you know, anything that grandfather shot outside of that, so he would go rabbit shooting, pigeon shooting and pheasant shooting, and we would sell that in the shop, and I used to go with him beating, and obviously it was a natural progression to go on to shooting yourself, but I was taught the correct way, and I'm actually a big advocate of it now, is the fact that people get too much too quick, and you know, a guy will take his son out, and obviously he wants to give his son everything he can, but when I learned, I had to carry a 410 unloaded for a whole year, never given any cartridges to shoot until I knew the basics of safety.
Okay.
So when I got to a fence, I had to unload the gun, even though it wasn't loaded anyway. You know, either someone held the gun or you propped it up in a secure place, got over the fence, got your gun, checked that it was unloaded, and then carried on. I always carried the gun broken, and you learn the rules of safety before you learn anything. And I think, you know, sometimes you get guys now, you know, I had an instance, certainly on one of the shoots that we run, where a guy turned up and brought his 8-year-old son, who was shooting a pair of 410s, and asked if he could stand out the front of the drive, and fired nearly 700 cartridges the first time he went pheasant shooting. Well, you know, what's he learned?
Right.
And he's learned that every time he goes pheasant shooting, he's going to expect to fire 700 cartridges,
Right.
which is not going to happen. So, you know, I think there's ways and means of learning, and I was very much old school, but I'm old enough to be right on the cusp of proper old school.
Yep.
With regards to that, and not modern styles, and those values have stuck with me all my life.
So you started, so then I guess you started carrying your own gun shortly after that, and then how did that get you into clay shooting? Like, what was the first, did you do some clay shooting to practice for and shooting birds, or did your was it your father or your grandfather mostly?
Grandfather mostly.
Did he, I guess the question I have for you is, was your grandfather, did he go shoot just to practice and get better, or did he do any organized shooting, you know, competitively or organized? Tell us about that.
He basically shot a few clays during the summer, and he was quite competitive. He used to shoot down the line.
So down the line,
or your trap.
American
trap.
Yeah,
American trap. And I started going with him, but and this is going to be.
Now, did you do any down the line or the trap shooting?
I did a little bit of down the line.
And how old were you at that point?
Probably about 12 or 13.
Okay.
Having, you know, just shot game really with a 410 to start with, obviously, and then.
And how old were you when you actually got to carry your own gun?
Actually got to shoot, probably 9.
9. Okay.
9, and then quickly moved on to a Winchester Savage pump gun with a cuts compensator on the end.
Okay.
And I shot quite a lot of stuff with that, and then went on to my first ever 12 bore. Actually was a side-by-side, a Maruku MS 150 side-by-side, which I shot all of my game and everything.
Now, how often, you know, so we're kind of getting a timeline here. You're just about to get into doing a little bit of trap shooting. How often did you go out during the hunting season with your grandfather?
Well,
Was that something you did weekly or something you did monthly, or
yeah,
how often was that?
we could shoot ducks. We could shoot ducks at home on a Sunday, and obviously pigeons and rabbits. So Sunday was a day that everybody would sort of go out and have a mooch around, rough shooting and that sort of thing. And then the butcher shop was closed Monday afternoon and Wednesday afternoon. So quite often on a Monday or a Wednesday afternoon, we would either go duck flighting or roost some pigeons, or
Gotcha.
you know,
So
something
anywhere
like
from
that.
once to 3 times a week. As a kid, going out.
But not far in volume of cartridges.
Right.
And then obviously he was going during the summer shooting down the line. He got quite competitive at it. I think he made the England B team at one stage for shooting down the line. And I used to go with him. But this is the amusing part for you guys, is that he was quite high up in the East Sussex Gun Club and Wildfellows Association, and they used to have an annual shoot.
What association was it?
A Wildfellows Association.
Waterfowl.
So, yeah, basically, so duck shooting, and they used to rent some rough shooting in different places and go out doing that. And so their annual shoot, where all of the other, so the Kent Wildfellows used to come, and all of the other associations within the southeast region used to attend and send a team
to shoot trap down the line.
No, it was basically sporting.
Okay.
So it was sporting,
Some
and it
kind of simulated birds.
all day. Yeah, all day, 25 targets.
Okay.
So everybody was there for the whole day to shoot 25 targets. You used to shoot 5 singles, maybe 5 doubles, and then
you weren't shooting at this time though.
Well, I started off then shooting a little bit of sporting with him, because I came in as the representative junior for the East Sussex Gun Club and Wildfellows Association. And it's quite a unique story, actually. I think it was 1977, which I would have been 13. I very proudly won the junior title at the East Sussex Gun Club Wildfellows Association Open Day, and they presented me with this tiny little trophy, which is about like that. And on the front, it said Junior High Gun, East Sussex Gun Club Wildfellows Association, 1977. And I was really pleased, and I took it home and I gave it to Mum. I said, look, you know, I've won this. And she turned it round, and on the back it had Best Budgerigar in Show 1963. So someone had obviously had an old trophy and written on the front of it, Junior High Gun, that won't matter. So, so those sort of things,
it didn't matter, you won.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Didn't matter what it said on it.
And so, you know, shooting in those days was not high volume. I mean, you think, and the reason I said it was, you think of what you guys do nowadays at your regionals.
Right.
You're shooting 600, 700, 800 registered targets at a regional over perhaps 4 days.
Yep.
And there we were on a Sunday with 150 entries of all over the southeast to go and shoot 25 targets.
Now, so I've listened to different interviews and podcasts you've done before. You did some skeet shooting at some point. Did you kind of get into that for a little bit before sporting, or give us that kind of history of, you know, you shot registered skeet shooting from what I gathered. You know, let's hear that. In, I guess, you know, I even maybe have a couple technical questions about that, but, you know, so kind of, you know, let's just kind of keep, we're going towards 1993 when you became a professional shooter. So 13, you started doing a little bit of organized shooting. You did your hunting. Now, you know, kind of what happened with skeet shooting and sporting clays moving forward from 13 to 1993.
And that obviously I couldn't drive at 13. So, you know, you learnt to drive when you were 16 in the UK. So I had to rely on people taking me different places. And my cousin, on my grandfather's side, was a keen shot. So we used to go together.
Skeet shooting, or?
Well, skeet shooting and sporting shooting. I mean, the demographic.
So you started doing some sporting as young as 13 or 14 then.
But the demographics of the UK was, in those days, there wasn't so many clubs. there was quite a lot of open shoots where there would be what we called straw bale shoots.
Yep.
And they would be set up on the day and advertised locally.
So that was essentially a farmer.
Yeah.
Took manual trap machines. He set them up in his field, and he was in business for a nominal fee because he didn't need a lot of investment.
Absolutely.
And he had people come out to shoot and give him something to do in the, when he wasn't planting crops or harvesting crops.
Absolutely. And it would be a cash competition, so you would pay cash to enter.
So you started those as young as?
Well, junior prizes. You would get your money back. So
you did some of those as young as 14 years old?
Yeah, probably 14 to 16 we were doing straw balers, and then started to get into the slightly bigger events, and clay shooting became more and more on the map. Ely Glen Grant did a series in the mid-80s where they gave, it was an all-round event, and for each discipline they gave a car, a Land Rover, and I think the high gun overall was a Range Rover Corniche, which, in those days,
that's a serious
prize, it's a serious prize now,
right? But
in those days it was an amazing prize, and a shooter from Suffolk called Wally Sykes won it overall. And then from then on, I think clay shooting became more professional in the UK. I started doing more and more open shoots, as in registered shoots, registered via the CPSA. And because my cousin, I still couldn't drive, my cousin wanted to shoot skeet. He enjoyed shooting skeet. I used to go and do a lot of skeet shooting.
Okay, so your skeet shooting was kind of more that he was driving the car, so
absolutely,
if you're going to shoot on Sunday, that's where you went.
Absolutely. And then probably what we would do is we would go to King's Ferry, which was probably the premier skeet ground in the country at the time, shoot skeet in the morning, and then try and do a sporting shoot on the way home. So you were getting the best of both worlds. And then
was skeet more popular at the time than sporting?
Massively popular.
More than sporting?
Or I wouldn't say more than sporting, but it was massively popular.
Sporting was growing at that point.
Yeah.
Skeet was already there, kind of. Okay.
And so King's Ferry, ideally, they would start shooting at 8:30 in the morning, and the first squad would go out at 8:30, and the last squad would go out at probably 4 o'clock.
Gotcha.
And every 15 minutes there would be a squad on.
So it was busy and popular.
Yeah.
So talking about this, the sporting at that point and the skeet shooting and the organized skeet shooting, as you said, kind of maybe came a little bit more just out of opportunity to be with your cousin who was going to the tournaments. And obviously at one point in time, I would assume he was a better shooter than you, as you were he was younger, he was older than you, right?
Yeah.
So, at some point in time, you probably had a little rivalry there, and obviously you've passed him at some point, as you've passed everyone. So I guess when you were starting to do those first sporting shoots and starting to do those first skeet shoots, was there anyone that gave you some basic pointers, whether it was your grandfather or your cousin or the people that you happen to be squatted with? I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is, as you get out there and you miss a target or have a failure, was there anything that you ever did or tried that came from some guidance that somebody said, hey, hold the gun over here, or do this method or that method? And I guess another question is even all the way back to, hey, you were learning to shoot skeet, that was skeet with there was no gun mount rule, right? You could shoot high gun or low gun or whatever. And how did you do it back then, if you even can recall? It's a long time ago. Do you remember even anybody talking about how you lead the target or method? I guess my question is kind of just broad, like in those initial years, was there any guidance that you remember somebody telling you that like kind of was a light bulb, or you just a lot of trial and error? Or?
Yeah, and I still believe to this day that the more self-taught people, in other words, you glean stuff from people by watching them.
Yep.
And the more self-taught people that glean stuff from watching videos or watching people shoot themselves, rather than actually being told in their ear,
yep,
go on and achieve more than the completely coached shot.
So potentially there, which we'll get in. We're going to be doing a lot of talk about our mental game, etc. Potentially there's some lesson that you believe in the power of visualization of visualizing and seeing what happened could be better for your mind than just conscious thought about how to do something.
Yeah.
So you learned a lot by watching.
Yeah,
Essentially,
and I think,
and who were you watching at that point? Just people that are out there at the ground that were a little bit better than you.
yeah, a little bit, a lot better,
or a lot better, right?
a lot better. You know, there was coming into the prime time for shooting and sporting to really take off in the mid '80s. So
Some
just
great shooters then at that point in time, right?
So just coming back a little bit. So I would have started. I would have got my license in about '81, and then I started opening my wings a little bit more and shooting skeet, but because I felt that shooting skeet was a good grounding, and I believe that every target you get on a skeet layout is what you're going to see on a sporting layout. Now, skeet was still very popular. Sporting was popular, but it hadn't taken off in the way that it was going to take off.
Gotcha.
No one knew that. You know,
Yep.
Hindsight's an exact science, isn't it? So going forward, I was shooting skeet and shooting sporting. Sporting was where the money was. There wasn't so much money in skeet. And then I shot through, and I started shooting a few hundred straights. I was shooting competitively at that point with the Remington 1100
In skeet.
in skeet and sporting.
Okay.
But obviously due to the point there's so many things that can go wrong with an auto and
a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and those days.
Yeah, the technology now in a semi-auto is not like the technology.
No, the rubber ring
the
and the
80s,
gas
right.
vent, you know, the whole thing, and you would have it in the doctor's surgery more times than you would actually have it in the field.
Right.
Then I went to a Maruku 800 HSW, which fitted the bill at the time, and I shot my first 100 straight with that at skeet. And strangely enough, I shot that gun was full and full. It was a game gun.
You used it full and full in skeet.
And I used it full and full in skeet, and I shot 100 straight. And from that moment on, I was always trying to think of reasons, and I'm a big believer that the shot string is longer with full choke, and provided that I've always been an advocate of coming through stuff from behind, which we obviously go through later on, but I felt that if the shot string was in front of the target and the clay flew into the shot string, provided you were on line, you're always going to have a kill.
Right.
So that's where the full choke side of my shooting came into, proper prominence. I then got rid of the 800 HSW and started shooting a Parker Hale, which was basically a Maruku copy of a Maruku trap gun, made in the same factory, in the Nikko factory in Japan, and there wasn't so many guns about, and there wasn't so many models of guns about in those days. So that went through, and I shot skeet right the way through with that until '86, and in '86 it was a bit of a corner turning milestone for me, in the fact that I got selected to shoot for England for the first time ever, and went to Melton Mowbray Gun Club for the home internationals, which is all of the home countries, Isle of Man, Jersey, etc., etc. Attended the event, and the first day was basically a warm-up competition where all of the countries shoot the event, and it's an open registered competition. Then you have the home international competition on the Sunday, and a big gala dinner in the evening. And on the first day, obviously I'm representing England for the first time, which is a massive honour and a nerve-wracking thing, and I managed to shoot 100 straight.
In skeet?
At skeet.
Yep.
And I had a very big lesson in life taught to me, and it's held me in good stead going forward. There was a famous English skeet shooter called Joe Kitson, and we went out to shoot off, and I was tied with Joe Kitson, and I got out there first, all ready to shoot off and fired up, ready to go. And he came out the crowd about 5 minutes later with 4 boxes of 25 cartridges, and he put them on the corner of stand 1 at the skeet. And everybody was laughing. And I was obviously very green at that point.
First time. What's he doing with 4 boxes of cartridges?
So I said to him, what are they for, Joe? And he said, well, I'll need to shoot that lot before I'm going to miss. And the crowd collapsed with laughter again and everything else. At which point I broke my gun, put it in the rack, and I walked over to the car. And those days, Kent Cartridge, who was sponsoring me, used to do all their cartridges in 500 packs. So I picked a 500 pack out of the car, brought it back on my shoulder, plonked it down next to his 100, which everybody then collapsed again. He walked on stand 1 and missed high 1. So, it was a good lesson in life. He never meant anything by it, only for a bit of fun, but it certainly stood, and it's still a story that I tell today.
Yep.
So I won the shoot off, and then the following day I thought, have I gone too early and shot my 100 straight too early, and would have liked to have done it in the home internationals. And the following day shot another 100 straight, and won the home. It was the only 100 straight in the home internationals, and won that outright. So won the home international first time I shot for England, and that set me on my path, really.
Gotcha. And that was 86, and then sporting kind of really mid-80s was kicking off, and you did, you and I had talked about it a little bit before, but started doing lots of all the competitions throughout England. And tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about that in terms of, how many competitions could you do in a week or a weekend, and what was the heyday of the competitions? And look, the best shooters in the world from the mid-80s to, even today, obviously there's great shooters there, but really the best shooters in the world from the mid-80s to the mid-2000s by far were, England had a stacked deck, right, of great shooters, and you could drive and compete against each other. I mean, the country's not that big, right? So you can drive and compete against each other weekly, or more than weekly. So tell us just a little bit of like what that entailed, how many targets were at the shoot, if you did a busy week of the competitions within the countryside, how many might that be, how many targets might that be, just the kind of, I mean, there was guys back at that point in time, I mean, just guys that are household names that people might know if they followed the sport a little bit. You had, back then, John Bidwell was, in his prime, and Smoker Smith was in his prime, and, a lot of great shooters, that I don't even, other ones that I don't even know. Stuart Clark and lots of guys, right?
Yeah.
Tell us just a little bit about that, kind of what that did for you, and if that helped you become a better competitor, and, just tell us about it a little bit.
So now I'm just going to go reset slightly.
Yep.
In the fact of I was shooting from 82 to 86, sporting and skeet.
Yep.
But concentrating a little bit more probably on the skeet.
Okay.
Then sporting started to get bigger and bigger and bigger with the advent of the Ely Gren Grant series, and people were travelling more. FITAS was becoming more prominent. So, the likes of John Wells, John Bidwell, Brian Hebditch, Barry Simpson were winning internationally, and I thought, international honours are, anybody in their right mind would love to win internationally, and I felt that having won the home internationals, not having won the English or the British skeet, but having won the home internationals was quite a pinnacle in skeet.
Yep.
And then,
so
because there was more,
at this time, you were 22.
22, yeah.
So George, you were telling me between 1982 and 1986, you were doing sporting and skeet with a little bit of a focus on skeet shooting, maybe even more so than sporting. And then, take us forward, and what was changing with the sport, and was, I know you had mentioned doing a lot of the round bale shoots or straw bale shoots, and kind of how did that, come into, I guess, 1993 when you said you more or less became a professional, where you quit your job as a butcher. So kind of what happened between 86 and 93, which I think is you were 22 years old, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of some of your formative years of kind of coming into really becoming the shot that you are today?
Yeah, well, as I say, so 86 we had the home internationals, which we talked about, and then if I just drop back a little bit, so about 82 I would have started driving and sort of cutting my own wings, and I was doing as many sporting shoots as skeet shoots, but sporting hadn't quite taken off then as it did later on. Skeet was still very prominent, so we could travel and shoot skeet in several places. And then at 86 I won the home internationals, and I felt, although I hadn't won the English or the British, that I'd probably achieved what I wanted to achieve in skeet, and I got such a buzz out of shooting sporting, and the atmosphere was, fantastic. You could do 3 or 4 sporting shoots in a day, whereas if you shot skeet, you were there for quite a long time. And then the international side of it opened up. FITAS became more prominent.
I mean, there was a lot of the world's best shooters, if not almost all of the world's best shooters, were from England at the time, right? So you kind of came up around those guys, I guess.
Absolutely, and with the likes of, Paddy Howe, Barry Simpson, John Wells, Brian Wells, the list, Biddy, the list was endless.
Yeah.
Philip Thard, AJ Smith, Duncan Lawton, to name, and there'd be 20 that I haven't named.
Yeah.
And those people were competing at an international level and winning regularly at an international level. And when you sit there and you think, you can win domestically or you can win internationally, if you're a competitive person, to win internationally has got to resonate a far better way.
Be nice to go on the bigger stage.
Absolutely, and but I hadn't even left the country. I hadn't even been out of the country in '86, and I went to my first ever shoot abroad in 1987, which was the French Professional Championships at Le Rabot, which was a very famous shooting ground in France, where they held world and European championships. It was a professional shoot, and basically you shot head to head against your competitor that you were drawn against, and you started at 64. The 64 competitors, all paying big money to shoot, and then you literally wended your way down to the final, and decent prizes in the final. And I went over there as a complete, I hadn't even, it was my first time out of the country, so no one had ever heard of me. And I drew in the first round. I had to qualify to shoot. And the first round I drew a guy called Pascal Delaroche, who I'm pretty sure in 1987 had won the World Championships in France in La Roche-Chaleur. He definitely had won the World Championships. I'm pretty sure it was La Roche-Chaleur. And so I drew him in the first round. So there's Joe Nobody from Sussex, never having been out of the country before, never been to France. Went down there with a guy who's now over here, Steve Middleditch.
Yep. You guys traveled down together?
Yeah, we travelled down together with another guy called Duncan Lawton, who I've got the utmost respect for. Duncan, I think he's got the most formidable style and outlook on life that anybody could ever have. And growing up, he was, obviously very forefront in when you look up to people. Anyway, we went down there and I drew Pascal Delaroche in the first round, and the French decided that they were going to handicap the system, and as I was a qualifier and an absolute no one from GB, I should be helped out. So they gave me 2 star on a 20 bird shoot off, and I shot 20 straight on my first one, so Pascal Delaroche couldn't beat me. It was a best of 3, and then they gave me 2 start on the next one, and I shot 19. So he lost 2-0. I knocked the world champion out in the first round, And if he'd shot 220 straights, he wouldn't have beaten me. So very soon my start was
that was your start, kind of saying I can make it and compete with the guys throughout the world.
And I got through all the way to the final, and I lost in the final to a guy called Frank Tisson, who reminds me about it every time I see him. But that was my first real journey into shooting abroad. And
gotcha. So at that time, then lots of your local competitions within the UK, within Great Britain, people being able to shoot against each other weekly. Tell us about that. Would there be, would you shoot 3 competitions in a week? How many targets were the competitions? Obviously, it was a time of no frills and manual machines, and things could be set up kind of ad hoc anywhere on a farmer's field. How often, would you be in those local competitions? And obviously, a lot of the best of the world were there, because the best of the world were from England, and they were shooting to win some prizes and money. And I guess the clay shooting season would be March till September, and then the game shooting season was kind of October to February type of thing. So yeah. I guess in that clay shooting season, what took place? Just on a normal week or month.
You're pretty much bang on. I wouldn't say that there was very much shooting went on at all midweek.
Okay.
It would have all been weekends.
Okay.
And there would have been registered 100-bird events. Sporting was now starting to take off, so there were more clubs and grounds throwing 100-bird targets.
Prior to that, like when you were in your teens, it was a lot of less than 100 targets?
Literally, 30s and 40s, and there would be, you could have a straw bale pool shoot where you would have 10 down the line, and if you shot 10 down the line, there'd probably be 12 straights, and they'd all shoot off. So going forward, sporting was becoming more and more prominent. You could do more sporting shoots, and we would plan a day. We would plan a day when you could do as many sporting shoots as you possibly could on the day, and try and get as many shoots in. One, you're seeing a huge amount of target variation,
yep,
which stands you in good stead going forward. 2, you're obviously competing in a lot of competitions, which makes the prize money, if you've shot well in those competitions, very attractive. But also, you've got to remember that this is in a day when, and it seems bizarre to be talking about it now, no garages were open. So, there was never a Sunday closing in the UK, everything was shut. So you had to make sure that on the Saturday, you'd got enough petrol in the car and everything you needed, because you couldn't go to a garage because there was never one open.
So the gas stations weren't even open?
Absolutely. So you'd go to a clay shoot, you'd do all your miles in a clay shoot, do as many shoots as you could, 4, 5, 6 shoots sometimes.
Really? Even with
Sunday.
100 birds?
Yeah.
So there's days that you did 500 registered birds?
You'd probably do 3 or 4 registered 100 targets and 250 birders.
Okay.
And then, but I mean, the availability was there, and that was just in the southeast.
So in a given month from March till September, you might easily do up to 2,000, 1,500 to 2,000
I would say
targets.
Probably 1,500 competitive targets
in a month. Say so we got March, April, May, June. So you're talking, you're a lot more registered targets than a lot of people might have done as they were in their formidable years, I would say, right?
And
you had good competition, So if I just compare that to us here in the United States, I think that's one of the things where the U.S. was way behind shooting. Besides, we started shooting later on. We also, our country's so vast that I never shot against the best shooters except a couple times in a season, and you could shoot against the best shooters in your country in a couple times in the same weekend. And then you did that for 7 or 8 months of 7 months of the season. So a lot of opportunity. It makes sense thinking back on it. I could always remember as a kid, right? I want to do well and want to be successful, and I was 14, 15, 16, 17, even into my 20s, going to world championships and be like, for lack of better explanation, the U.S. was way behind, and I would think, all right, well, we started later, so that's, give us the benefit of the doubt. That's part of the reason, right? But then I also think that competition aspect was probably part of it, that our best shooters would maybe go in competition against each other 3 or 4 times a year at most. Back in those days, maybe less, maybe a U.S. Open and a National, and you guys might have been shooting against each other at least monthly, if not multiple times on a week, you know.
But I also think where you're coming from there, and I totally agree with what you're saying, but I also think the hindrance for America in its earlier formative years was also target quality.
They were just too easy.
It was just rubbish.
They were too easy.
Absolutely. It was a feel-good factor. Everybody went sporting clay shooting for a feel-good factor. And when they came to a world or European Championship or an international event, a World Cup, they went, what is this?
Yeah, I can remember shooting the first time that I shot in the World Championship when I was in San Antonio in 1998, and I shot the World FITAS in 1999. And they had the World Sporting Championship at Southdown maybe in 99 or 2000. And I can remember shooting there and just seeing some big birds on the hillside there that looked like targets that I thought I could hit, and walking in there and missing a belly crosser all 4 times and just have no damn idea why I missed it. And it was, at the time, you were disappointed in yourselves, but thinking back, you just simply didn't have the experience of reading the bird and knowing how far, et cetera, it was.
And that's one thing that I'll hark back to in our earlier conversation about, looking at people and did I get any coaching and that sort of thing. One thing is when I could drive and I could do my own thing, I would try and look at shoots where I knew the best were going to be. Mm-hmm. So the likes AJ Smith was relatively local to me in the fact that he was South Coast, and those sort of guys, Philip Fussell, David Olive, all of those sort of people would shoot locally or within the southeast to me, and I could probably have gone to 2 or 3 events locally to me and won money, but quite a lot of the time I chose to go to those events, one to see where I was in the general scheme of things, and 2 to watch the best.
Gotcha.
Because by watching the best, you could cherry pick stuff.
Did you feel like you did a lot of that?
I did.
Kind of looking, standing back and watching how they conduct themselves, and
absolutely
picking up just different techniques, et cetera, along the way.
And how they viewed the targets. Some were very happy-go-lucky, naturally talented. Some had to work at it, mm-hmm. And how much they chatted before they went on to the stand. Some were very different to others, and where their mental focal point came in when they called for the target. All very interesting, and I'm not sure that at the time we knew too much about, or I certainly knew too much about what I was actually doing.
Yep.
But I think it's subconscious, and I think it's all played a part coming forward.
How many of those sporting shooters, that you would say at the time were the very best, the ones you were trying to compete with and trying to beat, and then obviously overtook all of them at some point? How many of those guys do you say, kind of just went out and shot and there was no formality, or they came from bird shooting, or they did bird shooting? A lot of it probably, right?
I would say probably 80%.
Right.
85% probably.
Gotcha.
And the degree of professionalism that we look at today has only come in the last 10 years.
Right.
Whether we like it or not, clay shooting has always been a sport that has never pushed on as much as it could have done because of TV.
Yep.
It's very difficult I'm a big believer that the reason TV doesn't work so much is it's very difficult to film the miss.
Yep.
So you have a golf shot and the ball lips out, or you hit it in the bunker. It's very visual.
You see why they missed it.
Yeah.
That's oh wow.
Yeah.
He was close, right?
Darts or snooker or pool.
Yep.
Rattles in the jaws and comes back along the cushion just the other side of the wire at darts. You can see the element of the miss. Whereas I could go bang over here
Right.
with a
I don't know
shotgun
what-
and the target's over there, and you don't know how close I was to
Right.
it. So, you know, we've always been lacking in that. Plus the fact that, you know, politically, it's a little bit of a taboo subject.
Gray area,
shooting, you know, guns and that sort of thing. Although, for me, it's the best form of, you know, a parent teaching his child to respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, we've had stuff fighting against us and that sort of thing, but the degree of professionalism that we see nowadays in shooting has only come in the last 10 years.
Gotcha.
But then I'm pretty sure that degree of professionalism has only come in the last 10 to 15 years in all of the other sports we look at. You look at the level that Tiger took golf to. You look at soccer players and now even coming in with the Tour de France, and the fact that they had people in the Tour de France just catering for the sleeping requirements of the cyclists.
Right.
And they would put their own bedding in a vehicle and they would drive to the next venue
Right. It's
where
a
they were
huge
going to sleep. So
dedication.
you sleep on your same bed, same pillows, same linen every night throughout the whole of the Tour de France. And, you know, that degree of professionalism has only come in the last 10 years.
Right. Let's talk for a moment. So we come into 1993. You're no longer working in the butcher shop. In the years prior, you would basically work in the butcher shop during the week and shoot on the weekends, or sneak out to an international competition, you know, when time allowed, etc. So obviously in 1993, I guess you gave it even more of a push and more of a, you know, you were already working hard at it. What changed when you decided you were going to become a professional, besides the fact that you didn't get a paycheck from the butcher shop anymore, right?
Well,
you know, so kind of did you do anything different, or did you go to more competitions? And I guess even in that time frame, as you were learning, you know, and this becomes an interesting question, you know, did you do anything different with your equipment over the years? And we know you're shooting a Matarese now, which you've shot for a long time now. So I mean, as long as I can remember, I think when I first met you, you were shooting a Cayman, but that would have been what, in the early 2000s,
been,
right?
95. Yeah, look, for me, you know, there's sort of the interesting part is from going to that first event that I've just described in France.
That's kind of when it was things clicked.
That
and
was
changed.
a light bulb moment.
I can do this.
You know, I can do it. I felt I could compete, you know, to beat the world champion, albeit with the current world champion.
Yep.
I think, hang on a minute, you know. And then, and now obviously I'm now open to international travel because I've been abroad.
Yep.
I'd got people wanting me to travel with them. So I then started doing a lot of shoots in France and Belgium. Teamed up with Thierry Delattre, who won the European Championships in '95, I think, in Cyprus, but was a very prominent shot in those days. Marc Paulet, a Belgian shooter who'd won certainly 2 European Championships. I'm not sure whether he won a world. You know, all of these phenomenal shooters. And the Europeans had a hotbed of it, you know, France and Belgium and that sort of thing. And I was out there mixing it with the best at international level. And whether you like it or not, when you've mixed it at the best at international level, and you come back to the UK and you go to a 50 birder, you're almost, that expectation is that you're going to do well, and you should win the event.
Yeah, it actually adds a level of pressure.
Yeah.
I always say that the way I say it is, when you're, you know, because I see it with kids all the time now, right? And most of the time it'll hold true, and but it's just part of, they're going to make it, you know, most likely if they're determined. You know, you gotta be good enough to win. Then you gotta learn how to win when you're expected to win, and you expect yourself to win. You know, when you win and you're surprised, wow, I won. That's easier than winning when you're expected to win.
Absolutely.
Both if it's people looking at you and yourself, right? I mean, that's just a learning curve. I don't think that's, you know, I think everybody has that.
Yeah, but so that was 87. I went to France, and then in 88 we had the year that basically changed my life, in the fact of we went right through the year, and I shot really well through the year, and I kept getting a bit of what I call nine-itis.
Okay.
So I'd missed the last bird, trying to make sure of it.
Now, if you did something like that, trying to make sure of it, what would you, kind of off topic from our conversation of history, etc., but very much on topic for our conversation of learning about the game? If you're killing 9 out of 10s and missing the last bird, it's obviously something mental, right?
Yeah.
Did you feel like that, came from just trying too hard, trying not to miss, and
both. I mean, and both is exactly the same.
What do you think would generally be what would actually cause the miss?
Hanging on,
to
probably hanging on, shooting the target in a different place, possibly looking at the gun, but then
maybe measuring a little bit, or being sure of the picture, or whatever.
I think a general combination of a lot of things, and it seems actually as well, the more you actually do it, the worse it gets. The more you think about it.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
No question.
Right.
And I'd gone through the year, and I'd shot pretty well right through the year. Hadn't had any luck. Fancied
I feel like you were shooting well, but not performing as well as you could.
In the immortal words of John Bidwell, George, I'm shooting really well at the moment. I'm just not hitting anything, which has always resonated with me. But I can sort of see what he means. But then with John, you never really knew what he meant. I've gone through that year, and I really fancied an English or a British, and there was nothing. And then at the end of the year, we had the first ever World English Sporting Championship, which was classed as the ICI World Grand Prix, and everybody came over. In fact, I think Glenn Eller came over and won the juniors at it.
Okay.
It was at Hodnet, so it was the first World Championship, and I won it, and I got to the last stand, and Carl Bloxham and I were having a bit of a ding dong, and it was a fantastic shot, and a legend, in his own lifetime over at home, and we got to the last stand, and I walked on there, and I think an inner calm came over, and it was, you've got an opportunity here to win a world championship. Don't mess it up. Don't shoot a 9. And I thought to myself, how do I? And I knew I'd got this opportunity coming up with 2 or 3 people out. So I thought, how do I not?
How do I pull this off? Right.
Get to the point.
Not do what I've been doing all season.
And I just thought, just break every target. I needed on the last, and it sounds like very easy stuff now, but at the time when you're not into being in that position, it's quite difficult. And I think I needed 7 to tie and 8 to win, which you think, well, I've got a bit of leeway. We're talking now. Right. Back those days when you've never won an event,
right, you're counting
and you're as tight as anything. It was still a massive ask, and I went in there, and I know I killed the first pair, and I thought, right, I can get these, and it was a difficult pair, long crosser and a bird going up a gully, and I'll never forget it. And I killed the first pair, and I killed the second pair, and I thought, right, come on, if I kill 1 out of the next 3 pairs, I've tied it, right. At least tied it. So if I can kill this pair,
thinking back on it, that's probably not a
great
way to be thinking, right?
No, but you're looking for every
right.
You're looking for every positive, and I killed the next pair. So I thought, right, now 1 out of each pair gives me the title, and I missed the first bird of the next double, probably subconsciously thinking about that. But then I knew I'd tied, and then I thought, right, I only need 1 out of here, and you're world champion, and you might never get that chance again. And I killed the pair, and from then on, it was almost like somebody subconsciously, and you didn't know about it, had got their foot on your head. And after you won the world championship, they just moved it to one side, and you could stand back up again.
Yep.
And from then on, the rest the rest really, I wrote a bit of history in '89 in the fact that I won the English Championship, the British Championship with the new record scores. And then we had the World Championship again in '89 at Doveridge, which I was nowhere at the halfway stage and came back after lunch and won it. And from then on, I really felt as though I could compete.
Yep.
And also, I think that when you win a World Championship, my mindset has always been, I don't want to give this back. I want to, I want as many of these as I possibly can. And so for me, I won the World Championship in '88, had gone through into '89, and I wanted to retain the World Championships, which was coming up again in '89. I won the English Open with a new record score of 96. I won the British Open with a record score then of 97. So my timing and everything going into the World Championship was really good. I probably didn't perform as well as I would have liked in the morning session. There was 50 in the morning and 50 in the afternoon. But I shot well in the afternoon and finished up winning the title again. So that was 2 years on the bounce. And then, for me, my career started to gain momentum at that point because I felt that I could compete, as in, I'd won 2 World Championships. I'd won the English, the British. I look back at the home internationals, and I'd won several other events in and around the UK and nationally in France and Belgium. We were travelling over there, started doing World Cup events. At that point, AJ Smith was probably the biggest name in sporting, with me coming up, close on his shirt tail. And my sponsors at the time were a piece of cake, and a piece of cake decided that they ought to try and organise a head-to-head competition. And this is where sporting is starting to fly in the UK. So they organised a head-to-head competition with AJ Smith and myself, shooting 300 targets of all of the disciplines. So we would shoot 100 English sporting, 100 FITAS sporting, and 100 sport trap. So we shot the 3 disciplines. Winner, high score wins, head-to-head, to be viewed by the public as a spectacle, and they had 2,200 people come from all over the country to witness AJ and myself shoot 300 targets.
Interesting.
Now that would never happen anywhere now.
No.
And that's how it was, and I very luckily got over the line there, although, at the time I don't think there was much between AJ and myself. It was just who happened to win it on the day. They billed it the Clash of the Titans. He'd achieved a huge amount in his career up to that point, and was probably just coming towards the end of it.
Tapering off.
And I was taking it on from there. But I wouldn't say that I was any better or any different to AJ going forward. Then 91 came. I finished up doing my first ever World Championship, which was in Andorra. And
where's that at again?
Andorra. So Andorra is right on the border between Spain and France.
Okay. And
it's a massive drug and tobacco smuggling country. There was, wherever you look, there was police and everything all over the place. Right up the top of a mountain, and I'll never forget that we shot on the Saturday night, and we had a delayed squad, and we were the last squad to shoot, and we had one pair to shoot. We sat up the top of the mountain for 2 hours waiting for them to fix the trap, which they eventually did, and we had one pair to shoot. We were worried about whether we were going to get down the mountain, and anyway, the squad quickly shot the pair. I killed the pair and left, and massive lesson learned in life. This didn't check that I'd been given pair killed, and when I got down to the bottom and we've looked at the scores, my score came up as killed and lost. I didn't come up as killed and lost. I was one light of where I should have been. And when I got back the following morning, I immediately put in a complaint. The whole squad vouched that I'd killed it. Everybody there vouched I'd killed it. But the referee's decision is final, so it stayed killed and lost. I shot 50 straight on the last day and got beaten by Duncan Lawton by one target. And I finished up then shooting off with Stuart Clark for silver medal and losing the shoot-off in probably one of the best shoot-offs I've ever been in, losing the shoot-offs to Stuart. So I could have been shooting off for gold.
Yep.
And I finished up winning bronze over a silly mistake.
Yep.
Which I'll never do again. And then 92, a very turbulent, traumatic year. I lost my grandfather and my father in the same year, but finished up winning the European Championship at High Lodge, and then went to Okemo Mountain for the World FITASC in 92.
That was in the US, right?
In the US,
Vermont,
yeah, Vermont.
At a ski resort or something?
Yeah, that's right, and won that, and then went to the World Cup final, which was a separate event in Cyprus, and my father wasn't very well at the time. He had pancreatic cancer, and he asked, he said to me, "You've got to go," because it was for the World Cup, and I went over there, and unfortunately, he took a turn for the worst, and we were called back, and I'm very lucky that the first flight out, well, not very lucky, unlucky as it turns out, in the fact that I was able to shoot my things. I didn't completely ruin the trip. I shot my targets in the morning, jumped on the first available flight out, and unfortunately when we landed, Dad had already passed on. But that's when clay shooting and reality meets head on, doesn't it?
Yep.
And although I'd won it and won the World and the European in the same year and the World Cup, by not being there right at the very end, it sort of, it was special in the fact that he knew I'd won it.
Yep.
But also not very nice in the fact that I wasn't there. So you have to take a reality check on what's sport and what's life in the end, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that then at the end of 92 brings me into 93, which is where we'd got to, and the fact that I was working full time in the shop, Mum was working full time in the shop. At that point, Mum was 60, she'd never had a day off in her life, and basically I said to her, "Look, you've got enough behind you now. You don't need to work anymore. I've won 3 world championships at this point. If I can't gain a living by from clay shooting,
Yep.
then we can always come back to the shop. Let's just shut the shop, give me a year, see what I can do, and if I can get a living within that first year, I'll stick with shooting, and we'll sell the shop. And if not, I'll come back to being a butcher. And I've got that to fall back on. It's lovely to have a trade." And in the first year, I was helped by a guy called Tony Horton, who I've mentioned, who was an ex-British Lions rugby player, and he opened a few doors to me. And Kent Cartridge at the time, Arthur Phillips, was incredibly supportive, and the rest is sort of history. I was helped out here and there, and with what I was winning competitively, it helped fill in, the bits and pieces that the butcher shop was put into it, and as I say, from 93, the rest is history, and we never look back.
Yeah, so I mean, since then, at that point in time, you had won a couple world championships. You've got 28 world championships. You're shooting a Matarese now. You've shot a couple other guns over your career. I know you mentioned you shot a Brett at one point. You shot a Cayman at one point. Obviously, you've been Matarese a long time. You had mentioned you'd shot at one point in time. You'd carry. We talked earlier that you use full choke. Now, did you always use full choke, or did you gravitate? At one point you said you actually carried I know you and I talking just, off the record, you used to carry 2 barrels and one of them had a more open barrel in it. And just fill us in a little bit on your equipment and changes in loads and, what you had used, and let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so when I won the first World Championship in '88, I was using a Parker Hale trap gun, which I've mentioned before, which was based on an old Maruku, and a Browning A1 Sporter.
So you had two different brands of guns with you.
Brands of guns with me, and 2 different heights of guns.
So the stocks,
the
the stock
trap gun
dimensions
shot,
weren't the same.
Trap gun shot way uphill, and
like a 70% high or higher?
Yeah, probably higher.
Okay.
And then the A1 Browning had a shorter stock and was absolutely so flat that I could only see, basically I was looking into the back of the top lever.
Gotcha. I mean, thinking back on it now, do you think, that it was just partly what you did at the time because you had confidence in that setup and equipment, and if you think of it now going, do you kind of sometimes say, what the hell was I even...
It would be crazy.
Right.
It'd be crazy to think of it now.
Right.
But at the time, my mindset was that anything up in the air, you looked at the bottom edge of, and anything below you, I mean, as well as I do, coaching and talking to people, majority of targets that are below your feet are missed over the top.
Okay. Because
of the angle of incidence and the way you view the target and where you put your gun and everything else. And I was a massive believer that if I've got a shorter stock, one, it's quicker to get it into your shoulder for mounting, and 2, when I was shooting down on stuff, because the line is a lot flatter, I could really go.
Shooting gun, right.
Yeah, I could really go point of aim on the bottom of the target and be putting the shot right where I wanted to on those downhill targets, which, initially...
Right, maybe it made a lot of sense, maybe it didn't, but it made a lot of sense at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had confidence in your
and
equipment.
Initially, we never shot huge amounts below your feet.
Yep.
Because, sporting targets have always supposedly been set up to replicate the flight of an animal or a bird.
Right. And you shoot very few below your feet in the wild.
Absolutely. So that was there. And then, having won the World Championship in '88, I also started shooting a bit of double trap, and the Beretta came on board.
Okay, so you're shooting a Beretta at one point for both
disciplines. So I then shot 2 Berettas.
Okay.
So I shot a trap gun and a sporter. And that was between 89 and 95.
Okay.
And then in 95, Beretta chose not to renew my contract. And I signed a contract with Cayman.
Yep.
And I shot Caymans between 95 and 2000.
Full chokes?
Full choke.
1 barrel, or did you carry 2 barrels?
No, I had 2 guns again.
Okay.
So up until 2000, I had...
One with a shorter barrel and a more open choke?
Yeah, well, not shorter barrel.
Okay, same
length barrel, but shorter stock.
Yeah.
Because I just felt I could mount it into, it's quick going away stuff for FITASC and that sort of thing. And in 2000, Cayman went through a bit of a tricky time, and I gave them a year to renew my contract, and they eventually came back and said that they would love to renew my contract, but I'd already gone down the Matarese route at that time, and they welcomed me into the Matarese family with open arms, and the rest is history. So.
Yep. Through your career shooting your Matarese, I know one point in time you shot with a 34-inch barrel. Was that for a year, 2 years, 6 months, 5 years? And just fill us in on that.
4 weeks.
4 weeks? Okay.
4 weeks. I shot a 34-inch barrel, handled beautifully.
I know at one point someone had mentioned that, or I was a student of the game as a kid and learning, and somebody had said that, so people were listening to what George Digweed was doing. Just didn't get the performance with it that you wanted, or didn't give it enough time, or maybe both, right?
Well, yeah, I'm a massive believer throughout my career in the reason that I've been successful. One of the reasons I've been successful is that I kill pretty much everything you should kill.
Yep.
And as many
don't give away the stuff you shouldn't be missing.
And as many of the hard targets as I can. And I think that is the formula for winning.
Yeah.
I felt that when I was shooting the 34-inch, I could kill all of the hard targets and the stuff that, you know, you
might be able to miss one.
But I was letting so many close ones slip because the balance wasn't quite there for me.
Yeah.
And the quick close stuff,
gotta move it more,
I couldn't move it as hard as I wanted to, and so, you know, why change something that's not broken?
Yeah, absolutely.
And for me, I just couldn't see the point in killing 50% of both when I've been killing 100% of one.
Yep.
And 50% of the other. 150% is a lot better than 100%.
Absolutely. You use game bore ammo. We know that. Shoot the white gold primarily, and a few of the. I saw you at the World Championship. You on some of those big birds a couple weeks ago. You're using a few of the high-powered shells or whatever they.
They're
those.
Dark Storm. They're Dark Storm 6.5s. And the other thing is,
which would be like R7, you know.
Yeah,
US
it would be a US 7,
which is legal in FETAF.
So the one thing that I would say with game bore.
And you've shot their cartridges for a long time.
Yeah,
that,
84.
As long as I can remember.
84. And
1 ounce.
To
what's
this
the
day,
white gold? 1 ounce in U.S. standards is like 1,250 feet, 1,280 feet.
Yeah, 1280, I think, something like that. To be honest with you, I don't really know. I've always shot the cartridge, and I'm not massively into ballistics and specs and that sort of thing. I put it in the gun, and
as long as they're breaking hard, you'd like it.
Absolutely right. And one thing I will say is that, you know, everybody thinks, oh, you know, he does this with game bore and he's got his name over this and he's got his name on that brand of cartridge and everything else. To this day, I've been shooting game bore cartridges since 1984, and I do not have a contract with them.
Just have a handshake.
And at the end of the day, I would not go out and use their products if I didn't think I could win with it.
Absolutely. When you come to the U.S. and you're able to use in sporting in the U.S. ounce and an eighth, the rule in England is 1 ounce. Do you use an ounce and an eighth
100%.
in sporting? And you shoot when you're at home or in the U.S. Do you shoot 7.5, 8s, both?
A mixture of both, whichever. You know, some grounds over the UK throw slightly closer targets. I would use an 8 on that. I don't think there's huge amounts of difference between the 7.5s and the 8s.
If you had to pick one, 7.5. If you knew
probably
you might get some
an all-round shell, it would give you the confidence.
Do you think there's an advantage though to using 8s and 7.5s? I mean, I use 8s and 7.5s, and you know, some of my competitors use one or the other. I mean, I tend to believe that if you can make the right decision and put the right shell in at the right time, it might be an advantage. But that's obviously, it's not proven, right? Because you have guys that do well either way.
And I would counter that by saying you're having to make another decision on the stand, which you don't need to do.
Yeah.
So if you turn up with a 7.5 or an 8, if you believe that will kill it, that will kill it.
Well, I think if you got to make the decision, you have to be. A couple years back in my shooting, I would get tossed up between which one to use, and and it was partly just because I wasn't practicing at all or doing any shooting, you know, when it didn't count with one or the other, and then just if your mind wasn't good in general, and then you had another decision. So I feel very confident in my decisions right now to choose the shell, and in any doubt, I just shoot a 7.5 because it's bigger.
Yeah.
You know, so if you had a competition sporting starting tomorrow, would you take both? Would you take one?
I'll probably take both and have a look at the general setup. But for me, whichever one I went with, I would only. So I never have 7.5s and 8s in my.
Oh, you don't.
No.
So you.
So I would take the two to the ground, and whichever. You know, the first.
Now let's say you looked at the stand, you're like, man, these birds are not too hard. I'm going to shoot 8s, and then you came to a big rabbit. You'd grab the 7.5, or
no? I've got my 6.5s in there.
Okay.
So I do take 6.5s, or a US 7.
Yeah.
And
can you shoot that in sporting in the US in the UK as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have got the backup.
You got something for a 60-yard bird and a long rabbit, etc. But you try to keep it very simple between one or the other for the day, if you can.
No question about it. Because you're taking away, yet again,
doubt.
Another element of doubt.
And so we just shot the World FITES Championships in Hungary. We had some big birds. I assume you were carrying then all of the 7.5s in your normal everyday load, which is the white gold for you, and then some of the dark storms.
Storm 6.5.
So you're putting the same thing in all the time, unless you looked at one and went, "Holy mackerel, that thing's out there."
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to go to a bigger load there.
But I think the bigger picture that we're missing here as well is it's all very well talking about cartridges and talking about this load and that load and everything else, and you know, do you focus on that and what are you focusing on here? The main focus for me on the fact is not making an excuse and you miss.
Right.
And you know, we've turned around and said, oh, you know, if you get a big bird and you put an 8 in, you know, a lot of people would put an 8 in on the big bird, miss it, and blame the cartridge.
Right.
It's down to one person.
Right.
It's down to you.
Yeah.
And when you put your hand up, there is only one thing that is between you and missing, and that's you.
Yeah.
And you know,
a lot of the bells and whistles and certain things is, you know, is someone looking for an easier way to get the job done.
And we've had a guy shooting in the UK. I'm not going to mention names, but you know, he's always looked for an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Always looks a great shot, but he's always looked for an excuse about why. And you know, it was the sun, it was the cartridges, it was his shoulder, it was, you know, whatever.
Right.
And if he'd focused that
all that energy on something productive, he'd probably do better.
Absolutely, 100%.
Along the lines, while we're on some of this, before we get into some more technical things, I know you use PILA lenses, and you've been using those for a long time. As PILA glasses, I've been using them, I think, since 2006 is when they actually came out with a, you know, I think you were integral in the design of having a shield, shield type of a lens. I've always went with the PILA, the ones that when I look through them, they look like the way I would be looking with no glasses on, kind of look more natural, which at the times they were the browns. In today's lenses, it's like the CED and CIED.
Yeah. Well, when I first started using them, they were called high def specs.
Yep, I still got a set in my bag.
Yeah,
you know, because I've taken good care of
them.
They
only had one colour, which was, I think brown. It was 40 brown or whatever it was. An incredible glass, mind.
Yep.
Incredible glass. And then Philip took over the company and took over the brand and the product, and integrally he wanted to get me into them, and I could never shoot in glasses. We never shot in glasses in the UK until probably.
I mean, when I was a kid going over, you didn't have to wear them.
No.
And that was in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
You know, so
up until that point.
I mean, what year you think it was that it became a rule? Mid 2000s.
It must have been mid 2000s. If he took it over in 2000.
Yeah, because I can remember being there as a kid and people not wearing glasses.
Yeah. We didn't have to wear it for FITES. You didn't.
Right.
You know, it wasn't mandatory. It was over here, which is why I always struggled a little bit when I came over, because all of a sudden you're presented with something in front of your eye.
Yeah.
Which I've never worn.
If they set a bird up towards the sun or something back home, would you put something on then?
I never really carried anything, so
gotcha.
You know.
No, you just squinted a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, or you know, try to block the sun out with your barrel as you were holding to wait for the target or whatever. But we're working with Philip and creating the Shield product, and then seeing how he's created so many different lens performances with, you know, the you know, having domination in your eye.
Yep.
How he sorted that out.
Right, all different
how
things.
How he's working with Zeiss. He's still the only person I know that is working with Zeiss, and Zeiss are the best optics in the world.
Yep.
Whatever anybody says, the clarity of those glasses, and the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah.
Go to any clay shoot, and the demographics are 85% of the people wear PILA.
We'll go into some more detail on different colors, etc. later. But now, just curious with that. Other equipment, we already talked about chokes, using mostly a full choke. I know you'd mentioned that you shoot some compact, which is the European version of 5-stand, and the rules are actually such that the targets can't be past about 40 yards, right?
Yeah.
What is the rule?
40 meter box.
40 meters, so roughly 40 yards. The birds are all inside of that, and often even closer than that.
Yeah.
You had mentioned you have another barrel that's choked.
Yeah, I've got
3/8 and 3/8, which would be the equivalent, I think, of about our light modified, something like that.
And you know, yet again, I still use my full choke barrels because
in compact
gun and in compact. But
so what do you have that one just for? In case you.
Well, you go to some layouts,
and it's just so close.
And it's just so close. You're penalising yourself. You know, here you are shooting against a field of 1,000, 1,200 people over 4 days. Why get the first flight home because you're shooting full choke? When you walk to that layout, the farthest target's 20 yards.
Right, you don't need full choke.
They've still got to be broken.
Yeah, you don't need full choke.
You know, all these people turn around and say skeet in the woods and everything else. A competition is a competition. However,
you're there to hit them, not judge.
Absolutely.
Judge what they are.
And at the end of it, if you've shot 200 straight, which I luckily have on 2 occasions, you can judge the shoot.
Right.
You can turn around and tell them exactly what you think. And on both occasions, I told them I thought it was a brilliant shoot. You just shot.
Right.
You just shot. How did you, the remaining scores, the nearest scores weren't right next to you.
Right.
I mean, I know in the world and Europeans now, you tend to get a bit of a backlog on 199s, 198s, you know, 197s. So that's purely and simply the degree of professionalism.
Yeah, and somebody's still going to win. So.
Of course they are.
I guess to just kind of give us a little bit of info on that topic, if you had a less experienced shooter, the guy's been maybe just started into his first competitions, or even maybe he's a, you know, up to the A-class rank, you know, A-class to a novice shooter, and they had a choke like most guns do, at least that we purchase here in the U.S. with screw chokes. You know, getting a fixed choke gun is kind of more of a custom order nowadays. What choke would you tell them to put in there? You know, would it be like an improved cylinder and a modified, or, you know, which is a 1.5 quarters, I guess, for you guys, right?
One is it depends what they're going to shoot.
Okay.
One, it depends what they're going to shoot, and two, I think that they've got a perfect opportunity when they're coming up through the ranks to actually utilise the full set of chokes and see which works best for them.
Let them figure it out. Don't just screw something in there because your coach said you should shoot improved cylinder because you're learning, you're not that experienced yet.
Absolutely.
Try it. See what happens with a skeet and see what happens with a full.
And for me as well, I'm a big believer in practicing, for somebody like that, practicing with full choke, because it makes them more exacting.
Okay.
And then if they want to open up in a competition,
go
ahead, because you're gonna have that many more pellets.
Right. You're not going to hit anybody. You're not going to hit anybody by luck in practice.
Yeah.
So maybe you learn something.
Yeah.
Or you keep working at a shot.
And if you put quarter in practice, and you're breaking long birds in half and doing that and everything else, you know, that might not happen in a competition. But if you're breaking the targets with full choke, and then you open up just slightly for a competition, you're just going to get that little buffer.
Yep.
In and around where you're going to put the shot, you know, new to competitions, a little bit tight, etc.
What do you carry in your range bag? Anything, you know, that's you don't have any chokes in there.
Most people would say sandwiches, but it's not the case.
You don't have any chokes in there. I mean,
I don't have chokes.
Right. So
all my guns
you got your set of glasses,
chokes.
I would assume.
Yeah.
Maybe you have some
earmuffs.
Grease or something. Earmuffs. No grease.
No grease. Earmuffs, pouch, cap.
Bottle of water.
There we go.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Is your trigger on your Matarese removable or no?
No.
No. So you don't have a spare trigger in there.
No. It's a MX-12 action, so it's coil springs.
Yep.
And I've never, touch wood, never had a problem.
Yep. Wear a hat when you're shooting, just in the event of the sun, not all the time.
Yeah, and I try and wear a hat. With quite a light undertone on the peak, purely and simply because in fact I noticed this when I shot double trap.
So the majority of the time you're shooting without a hat.
No, I would shoot with that.
Most of the
But
time.
with a lighter peak.
You want the bottom of it to be
Yeah.
white or tan or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that came about from shooting double trap. And when I was shooting double trap, obviously you're waiting for your fellow competitors to shoot.
Yep.
And your eye line, and you would know this from shooting an Olympic trap, do you look out into the range? Do you look at the ground in front of the range? You know, where do you look while you're waiting? And I felt it was quite good for me to look at the ground in front of me and just wait until the person that was next to me shot, when I would then lift my eyes to my focal point to look for the target. But I felt that looking at the floor with a dark peak, and then when I looked up, it took my eyes too long to adjust. So his first target when he came out was almost a blur.
Yeah.
And I think that you can shade off too much and not allow enough light to come into your eyes by having too dark a cap. So I think that for me now, I just wear a cap with an orange or a light orange or white or grey underside, allows that light to come in and lets the glasses that we use do their job.
Gotcha.
But I think if you put too much shade over your eyes, you don't get the right amount of light going into your glasses.
Gotcha. So we've talked about chokes, which you don't carry. We've talked about loads. We've talked about glasses. We've talked about you wear headsets, right? Ear muffs. Okay. Yep. Anything else that is important? You wear a pouch, not a vest. Okay.
Yeah, I wear SWATCOM ear protection, which is the latest ear protection on the market. Really good, really comfortable silicone pads on the thing, which is a comfortable thing. But I also wear earphones when I'm out on the range, because I feel as though it gives me a little bit of distance.
Yeah.
And without being rude, you know, quite often when you're on the range, people want something of you all the time.
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm on the range, it's effectively me being in the office.
Yep.
And people wouldn't just walk into your office and, if you were on the phone, start having a conversation with you about something else.
Yep.
So rightly or wrongly, I wear cans, and you know, sometimes I would ignore people that,
when you're trying to pay attention and get ready.
absolutely.
Help you keep your mind in the right place. It's kind of serves another purpose.
Yeah, I'm out to do a job.
Yeah, if you're out there to hit every bird you can and win, you got to do it.
Yeah,
you got to be in control of your destiny.
Yeah. So
32-inch barrel, right?
32-inch tapered barrel, 11-7, and I just
11-7 on the rib. Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
I just believe that whilst I don't look at the gun at all,
okay,
well, subconsciously you don't look at the
Try
gun.
not to. Right?
Yeah. But then sometimes that happens. But subconsciously you're not looking at the gun. But I just feel that the rib being tapered down just allows your eyes more of a focal point.
Okay.
And when you're looking at your hard focus rather than your soft focus, I think it just gives you that almost tunnel vision.
Gives your eyes some guidance of where they're going.
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
One more question in that regard. I've looked down your gun. Your point of impact is probably 60-40, 70-30. Would you agree with that?
100%.
On your current gun, I knew back in the day you know, shot something
Slightly,
a little bit
probably
higher, but you know, things have changed and you've learned more, and you know.
Well, the other thing is that having one gun that shot probably, you know, 50% lower, and the gun that shot 50% higher. Now I'm shooting one gun. I've tried to come in the middle.
Yeah, right. Yep. So like a 60-40, 70-30. Your stock is, you know, I guess they built that for you at some point.
Yeah. Standard length, parallel comb. Because I'm a big believer in the fact that if you push your head into the stock, wherever it is on the stock, you should have the same view down the barrel. Whereas if you've got a sporting stock and you're further back, it's going to be lower. Further forward,
so you have
higher.
no drop in there at all. Then.
No drop on that comb at all.
Gotcha.
It's completely parallel with the barrel.
Gotcha. And you've shot that for how long? Since you started
Since I've started.
Since you started with the Parazzi, or
No,
even back with the
back with the
Beretta and the
Maruku.
Cayman and everything?
Because it's parallel combs are trap stocks effectively.
Yep.
You know, the Monte Carlo stock is a version of a trap stock.
Yep. And
It's basically parallel.
You just have a parallel stock with no Monte Carlo now. So along those lines, you mentioned push your head into the gun. Let's talk about that for a little bit, because it's a question I get all the time. You know, someone watches a video of me and says, "You look like your head's really in the stock." Or I watched, you know, in the U.S. we have some guys that use a light cheek pressure. You know, someone that uses a light cheek pressure might be a Gavin Miles or a Todd Hitch uses a light cheek pressure. And then we have people that use no cheek pressure. You know, I would say if you look at someone like David Radulovich, he has maybe a little more cheek pressure now than he used to have. Okay. Wendell Cherry uses a light cheek pressure, but his head is on the gun. But then we see some guys like Joe Finizzi, who has done well in the last couple of years, obviously in the junior division, but also in the open division, with his shooting being, doesn't have his head on the stock at all. Okay, it's not touching. You could put two fingers between his, and I know he started with that because he was a skinny little kid and the gun didn't fit, you know, but that's basically what he's still using. I mean, without basically, obviously this is your opinion. My opinion has always been it has to make more sense if you have your head on the gun, because you have some kind of anchor and it's got to be a basis of consistency, you know, is my opinion, right? But I'm also not going to say that it absolutely has to be that way, because we've had some people prove that with their success that they can do it a different way. What would be your just opinion on cheek pressure? I guess your opinion on position on the stock, forward, back. You know, every now and then you'll see someone mount the gun high in their shoulder where the top of the gun's sticking up. You know, let's just kind of go through that a little bit, because it's general information that we can provide people.
For me, it starts with having your shoulders parallel.
Okay.
Your shoulders have got to be parallel, because if they're up or down,
okay,
you know, your body's out of rotation and out of sync.
Okay.
For me,
so staying parallel to start and through the shot.
Absolutely, because here you're parallel everywhere. If you're there,
something's going to change as you swing.
One's going up, one's going down. So
is that something you just learned over the time through doing and kind of tweaked your
and looking at all sport,
watching people? You know?
Yeah, looking at all sport. You know, you play a tennis shot, and you're leant back, the ball's going to go up in the air. You play a drive, you're leant into the drive. You know, a smash is down.
Just understanding the geometry of it.
Absolutely, and you know, sports like cricket, tennis, squash, all involve the same swing technique as shooting.
Yep.
For me, you've got to put your head on the stock, and I feel that whilst shooters have had success without their head being, you know, too much on the stock, one, I think that's when they've had the success from being in a position where it doesn't matter and they don't care, and they've never really been in that position before, so they don't understand pressure and that sort of thing, and all of a sudden they've won the event. To me, that doesn't necessarily count
for a basis of what you're discussing,
because going forward they've now got to do that again in the same environment that people are going to expect. And because people are going to expect, they try and do something different. So when it comes to the crunch, and their
body might tense up and tighten up.
Absolutely. Well, all of a sudden they'll start putting their head on the stock to make sure. And now their picture's changed.
Right.
So their picture is nowhere near.
The eye is not in the same spot as it was prior.
Absolutely. So for me, the only thing
could be from adrenaline, it could be from trying not to miss, fear, pressure, whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely. And
get rid of so if you summarize what you get rid of a variable.
Yeah.
Put it there. Can't go any further. It's going to be the same spot every time.
Absolutely. And it's an ability to be able to replicate what you do under practice conditions as you do under pressure.
Gotcha.
And we can all stand there and go like this under practice conditions. But when it comes to it, and they turn around and say, right, now you've got 2 stands to go to win the World Championship, and you're right in here because you're focused and you really want to do it, all of a sudden, there's probably a 3 or 4 yard at 40 yard variance
where
of
your point
you're
impact
shooting the
goes.
gun.
How head position on the stock? You obviously
Pretty much.
your head's towards the front. Is that what you recommend?
It's mid front.
Okay.
Mid front. I would say if you took the stock off there, that being the front, that being the back, my head would be in here.
Yeah, I mean pretty close to your hand though.
Yeah.
Right? You're not.
Anything's going to be quite close to those.
It's not the head. It's just happened to be the area that the hand takes up.
Yeah. But look, for me, my head is in the most comfortable position for me.
Gotcha.
To keep my shoulders square and to keep my head as upright as I possibly can. And the other thing is that I see a lot of people, including you.
Yeah, I hunched down too far.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying yes, it's a fault.
Well, it is. It's something I've worked on forever. And as I was a kid, I always leaned too far forward. And I think being, the gun, me growing, and the gun not lengthening the gun, and then having a real long neck. Okay, and at the time, as a kid, particularly tall and lanky, I would mount the gun too low on my shoulder, get my head forward. Something I've always kind of fought with, and I think it definitely cost me shots, and I still work on it. But it's old habits die hard sometimes.
No, and
get hunched up in the front. That's you're not going to see correctly.
And I liken it back to other sports. You don't see Roger Federer, or those sort of people when they play sport. They look as though they've got as much time as anybody in the world, like a robot.
Yep.
But they're generating that time through, I believe, their eyesight.
Yep.
I believe that the best shots and the best sportsmen and women around the world have got slightly superior eyesight, and their eyes take more pictures of the object.
Right, whatever's
happening. So that allows them, because they're taking more pictures, it allows them more time. But also, you never see them. All right, you might see them down when they're hunched waiting for a serve. But when they actually take the shot, their head is dead still in an upright position over the racket to where the ball is going to be played, or it's over a cricket shot or over the golf shot, and their head's in an upright position. You never, as soon as you're down here, and we've talked about it, do you use your arms, do you use your body? As soon as you're in here, your spine is bent.
Yeah.
You can't use your body and you can't use your arms to an effective manner because your head controls what you do.
Yeah, your balance point gets off at that point.
Yeah, of course. So for me, mounting the gun to your head, keeping your head upright, is a massive plus point in learning to shoot. And I see so many people, and I coach a lot of people when it comes to game shooting, and it's to get them to keep that. They want to do that all the time.
Bring the gun to your face more.
Whereas if you and one of the drills that I do at home and tell people to do at home is to get a mirror.
Yep.
And if you put the mirror about 5 or 6 meters in front of you, and just walk up to the mirror, and where your nose touches the mirror, it'll leave a little condensation spot.
Yeah.
Just draw a black felt tip pen on that condensation spot and walk back. And at home, practice mounting your gun on the condensation spot, which is a black mark on the mirror. Now, if you're lying, you'll be able to see it.
Right.
If you keep your head still, mount the gun to your head, and you're right on the middle of that black dot, that's a perfect gun mount. And that's where you need to be. If you're lying, you'll know that it's to the right, you'll know it's underneath, you'll know it's above it. You're only lying to yourself.
Right.
And if you can get that right,
you're learning your head position.
Yeah.
So your head position is important for your gun.
It'll put 15% on your scores immediately.
The one thing watching your mount, and this is, maybe a question that you have a great answer for, that you don't, or you might be informational for you when I tell you. As you mount your gun, compared to what I would feel like a lot of, the standard in American coaching, if someone's going to teach someone about gun mount, etc., as a general philosophy, not necessarily that everyone does that, but as a general philosophy, everybody really preaches, make sure as you mount your gun, both hands are directly together and they're moving in sync, and maybe your front hand is actually the one that's really doing kind of all the work, as you mount the gun, particularly if you're using more of a low FITAS style mount, even more so than a sporting mount. We're assuming that we're not shooting with a high gun with with a sporting mount, but it's some kind of out of the pocket, just out. You seem to have a little bit more right hand in your gun mount than I would say is the standard ideology taught in the U.S. And I guess my question is very simple. Number one, is that just kind of what you had done over the years from all your shooting and bird shooting, and you even did skeet shooting with a little bit of an out of the pocket move? Or is that something you've done intentionally? Or it's just that's how George Digweed has mounted the gun? Go all the way back to when I said, who was really coaching you when you were 13 and 14 and 15? And the real answer is, well, you're just watching some other people. So no one was coaching you. You were coaching yourself, right? Yeah. So is there any, and I don't need I'm not looking for a certain answer. I'm just looking for because I think there will be people that watch your instructional videos. George is coming out with a couple instructional videos. We're doing an instructional video together. I think they might be curious to see that and then have a question, and we'll explain that. You'll explain that then, but I'm just curious, right? Some people might criticize that. I know, Coach, I wouldn't criticize it because I'm a student of shooting, and I'm a student of what works. And if it's something's working and it gets you there, maybe something else works a little bit better for someone else. But I know a lot of the leading coaches in the U.S. would criticize you, okay, for your gun mount. But you can't criticize someone who's won 28 world championships and you've won 0. Okay.
Well, there's a exact reason for it. I'm seriously impressed that you've picked up on it, because not many people, unless you're heavily into the coaching side of it and the technical side,
they're not paying enough attention to those.
No. And the reason is, in 1986, I was working in the butcher shop, and I was cutting through some semi-frozen meat.
Yep.
And as I was cutting through some semi-frozen meat, I hadn't got my watch on, and you'll see there, the knife slipped.
Yep.
And I cut from there to there, and I cut all the tendons off.
Yep.
To that hand. And that hand was rendered completely useless for 16 weeks. Okay. And they sewed all the tendons back.
Did you still try shooting?
Yeah, I tried shooting one-handed.
Okay.
And I was shooting one-handed using my right arm only, obviously, using this as a bit of a rest. But for 16 weeks, I lost all the muscle. And even now, you'll still see...
Yeah, this arm's bigger.
Yeah, and that's the reason. So because
it
never really recovered as much as it has done.
So you use more right-handed.
So I use more right-handed because that's where my power is.
Yep.
And that's where my control is.
Yep. I feel like a thing that's, and this can get into some detail that, that you go ahead and talk about in your other videos, but we'll kind of give a little bit away here. I feel like a lot of, if you rotate your body to get controlled movement, then keeping your right hand through the movement of the shot is really what should be happening anyway, not the front hand, but I think what's taught is the hands move together to mount the gun, or the front hand works hard to mount the gun. That's taught readily in the U.S., including myself as well, to keep the barrel level and from dipping or pivoting too much. And then, but I think what's not taught is if you're rotating your body and moving with the bird when the gun mount is completed, really that movement, you should have more right hand through the shot. Would you agree with that, right? Because you don't want to push the left hand because that's the arms.
To be honest with you, if you've mounted the gun properly, your head's square, you've mounted the gun hard into your shoulder, and you've got a good grip of this hand in the right position, your head's on the stock, you're locked in, this is useless.
Yep, because you're using your body.
Yeah.
I'll do that occasionally. I have a student who will not stop jerking the gun or pushing that front hand. I'll have them take their left hand off of the gun.
Yeah.
Okay. And try to shoot.
For me,
because that forces the body in the rotation.
But it allows you to rotate your body. I'm rotating quite a lot more than you are. So at the end of the day, once I've got that going, this hand is almost, completely
Gotcha.
a non-event.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a good answer, and that's something to know. I don't think anybody knew.
No.
And somebody might say, well, his mount doesn't look, like he's moving both hands in sync together. And the simple answer is, well, at one point in time, you couldn't use it, and it didn't have the strength, and it still doesn't have quite the strength as the other one. And,
no. And I think it's something that it evolved nearer the time, and it's not,
just became
it's
what
not
you do.
broken.
Right, just became what you. Get back to my point. If it works, don't fix it.
Jim Furyk.
Yeah.
You only need to.
Yep.
Only need to go there. Probably, if you asked any coach at all, would be the worst golf swing the planet's ever seen, and yet at impact, he's perfect.
Yep.
And that's why he's won what he's won.
Yep.
And he's, a legendary golfer.
Yep.
So, you don't have to be textbook.
No.
But it needs to come right at the right.
Well, I think that when we get into talking about some form and stance and balance, which we've done, just to add one more thing to that, since we're on those topics a little bit, you feel like you're fairly balanced. Your weight's a little bit back, forward, back, centered.
I would say that my weight predominantly is off my back foot.
Gotcha. So like center back.
Yeah, center back, and that in my I
helps
always
keep
tell
your
people,
head right.
I always tell people, if you're going to keep your head still and straight, you've got to be stood over your feet. Your stance is too wide. Your feet are outside your shoulders. Doesn't look right. Your feet are inside your shoulders. You feel as though you're going to fall over.
Gotcha.
Get your feet underneath your shoulders. Everything else will follow. Just going back slightly as well to the left hand being useless. I have had one or two problems in shooting a certain type of target over a period of time, and I've learnt it now so that I can actually deal with it. I learnt how I've dealt with it. I've actually created a slight fault to deal with it. But where my right arm was so dominant and my body was so dominant in the swing of the gun, that if you had a tower bird that was climbing, I would tend to shoot underneath
you're not
it.
Lifting your hand with the target.
Absolutely. Because I'm rendering this useless, I'm just following with that. And I was missing a lot of that stuff underneath. And now I've had to create a fault where I've turned back into the tower target slightly, which reduces my ability to swing through. But because it's throwing me off balance, it allows this arm to follow the line up.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Going into that, segueing into kind of another good question, and it's a little bit related. So if you mounted the gun and you, like you said, didn't have to be perfect. Okay, if you decided that your technique on a crossing shot was going to be like a pure move, mount, and shoot, and you were going to go right to a spot in front of the bird and fire the gun when it hit your shoulder and your face, that front hand would be more important on the gun mount, because it would have to get exactly to the right place when everything came together to deliver the shot.
Absolutely.
So within your style, the overwhelming majority, I've spent 2 days filming with you in England. We did some shooting yesterday here in New Jersey at M&M, and your style is predominantly, by and large, swing through, except in a situation where the bird might happen to be right there and your gun's in front of the bird after a double or something like that. Or if you purely had no time to be behind it first, on a rare occasion. From what I've noticed, now I've watched you shoot for, up close and personal for basically 3 days, and from at a distance. We happen to be squatted close to each other at the World Championship on the squad behind you, but that was from a distance, so obviously can't analyze that closely. I think one thing that you mentioned there, well, that move doesn't have to be exactly purpose if you get the job done, I think has a lot of merit. But I think a little bit of the context of that is you use a style that gives you a little bit of leeway, you know, and potentially that's relatable to a lot of people, because I would say that the average Joe is not perfect on his form or style or gun mount, in the sense that, you know, you would be much more concerned about your shoulders being level, your balance being correct, your head being correct. And if the gun mount had a little too much right hand versus left hand and it didn't go exactly into the correct insertion point, you can still get where you want to go and move and rotate. Versus if you had a different style, that gun mount might be the beginning and the end of your technique. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
you know?
no, 100% it makes sense. But also, and with listening to you mentioning that, I also feel that by shooting swing through, I'm also giving myself a 50% advantage. And this is going to sound crazy, and you know, everybody always says, "Oh, there's loads of techniques, and you can't do this, and you can't just have one, and you can't do this, and everything else." But from my point of view, if you come through the target from behind, you're online. So,
well, your gun mount could actually, if it's poor gun mount by whoever's standard, whether it's someone who really wants a perfect gun mount or by someone who just inherently couldn't develop the correct smooth mount. If you come from behind the bird and your gun mount was a little bit erratic or smooth, or your coach told you used too much right hand, if you came from the back side of the bird to get to the front side of the bird, it didn't really matter that much, did it?
No.
I guess that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, and for me, look, there's your target. You've got 4 places you can miss it. Okay? Now, if I'm coming through that from behind and the target goes up in the air, I can go with it. If I'm coming through that target, it dips in the wind, I can go with it. If I'm pulling away here and it goes up, I've got no picture.
Right, or you just inserted the gun out of maintain
absolutely,
out front
absolutely,
somewhere.
or whatever on the others. So for me, I feel that by coming through it from behind, I'm taking out, yet again, all we've got to do is take out the variables.
Right.
If there's only one person that's going to miss it, and that's you, it's not your gun and your equipment.
Right.
And you've come through it from behind and you've taken out your line, so
now
you can only miss it. And all of a sudden, you're 50% to
closer.
Breaking the target, and then it's your timing and speed in relation to the object that's moving gives you your gun speed through the bird. So for me, by swinging through, it does take out 50% of the variables are missing.
Yeah, and one thing, I've spent some time analyzing the footage we've done with you, with the shot cam, etc. And I think that, you know, which we can talk about a little bit, I feel like there's a misconception with swing through in general as a theory, especially in the United States. And I'll talk about that for a moment. So I use more swing through in my shooting now than I ever have. Why? I think just through doing and learning, I realize it works, particularly for me on certain shots. It's not my predominant method, but it's probably counts for at times 30% of what I do on a course, and maybe even more so than when I become very reactive and instinctive, I use it even more often without realizing it. If we back up and talk about swing through in the United States, it doesn't, or pass through, whatever you want to call it, right? It doesn't have a large following, and the reason it doesn't have a large following is very simple. There's a lot of teaching in the United States, especially compared to the rest of the world, right? You know, we've professionalized our sport, and you know, there's a lot of good things that come with that, and the ability for people to get coaching and learn is probably by far greater here than the rest of the world. There's more opportunities. Our coaches, my coach being one of them, Dan Carlisle, taught me to shoot started my first lesson with Dan would have been like 1996. And you know, I have a piece of paper that he gave me from back then. It says, "Do not let the bird get in front of the barrel." Okay, says it right on the page. So what do you think I did for the first 10 years of my shooting? Not let the bird get in front of my barrel. I know at the time, you know, John Woolley, who came over from England, was another, you know, John Woolley and Dan Carlisle were two of the original coaches in the U.S., you know, in the mid-90s. Sporting clays was really taking off, and John Woolley is the same thing. Kind of mostly a move, mount, and shoot, a little different than Dan, who was a little bit more of a pull away Dan would be a maintain and a pull away shooter, and John was more of a maintain, move, mount, shoot, using your timing and your gun mount. Very big on gun mount, and but not using swing through as a predominant method by far. So I feel like in the U.S. there's a little bit of an ideology that getting beat by the bird can be a bad thing, right? And I think the reason is just because that's what people were told. Okay, it's like, don't cross the street over there when you're a little kid, because something bad could happen to you.
Yeah.
So you know what you do? You don't go across the street.
No.
Okay, you don't even know what's over there. Okay,
Yeah.
but you stay on your side, right? So in my shooting, I've used swing through, and it's evolved, and I've learned a lot about using it in my FTAS shooting, particular, that I really can shoot my quartering birds a lot better. Okay, and it's kind of become a little bit more instinctive in my shooting. So I give that context because I think it's important to understand, the ideology that someone listening might have is the reason that, say, Dan Carlisle or John Woolley, and then that became me teaching people, and then it became Will Fennell teaching people, and then that became Wendell Cherry teaching people, because when I was a kid, Wendell Cherry had lessons with Dan Carlisle, he had lessons with John Woolley. So the thought process just got passed on. So a lot of our people coaching in the U.S. the most, particularly over the last 20 years, Dan Carlisle, John Woolley, Will Fennell, Wendell Cherry, Anthony Matarese, generally don't come from behind the target as their base philosophy. Out of all of those, I'm by far the one who uses more swing through and pass through and come from behind the target, just because I learned that it worked, through evolution. But the thing that the whole reason, right? The question I never asked when I was 10 is, why can't I come from behind the bird? Okay, which is a damn good question, right? I just didn't do it because that's what my teacher said. Okay, the reason I think that they didn't teach it is the risk that they thought was, at least as when I was taught as a kid, don't use swing through, the bird will beat you and you have to be out of control and catch up to it. I think that the risk that we are talking about there was gun speed. That if the gun speed actually went too fast because you were behind the bird, you could lose control of your gun and not be in synchronization with the target. With any method, though, there's a risk, right? As I've studied the game, and I don't necessarily, if someone emailed me and said, I want to take a lesson, I use this method or that method, can you help me? Yeah, I understand every method, and I teach students who come from a maintain lead background, and I just keep them doing that and maybe add a few tweaks in their game. But so back to the point of where swing through could have possibly not gotten the traction in the United States that it probably should have as a method and valid method, is just because that was the ideology and what was passed on. Guys like me passed on stay in front of the bird. Guys like Wendell Cherry passed on stay to the front of the bird. When Will Fennell, and the kind of the list goes on. And it was related to gun speed, that the gun could get too fast, right? But I don't necessarily think that it's a fair assessment of the method. I spent a good amount of time watching your shot cam and watching over your shoulder, and your gun at the end of the shot, really, even to teach myself something relative to my method, I use a lot of pull away, maintain lead. Your gun speed at the end of the shot as you're triggering the shot really at times is even slower than mine. Okay, and we've got a guy using predominantly swing through, if not all swing through, and someone who is staying more to the front of the bird as at least 60% of their method. You would think that your gun speed at the end of the shot would be a lot faster than mine, and it's really not. And I think that's kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of understanding swing through. So I'm just curious, is there, when you're passing through the target, I guess would bring up two questions for you to think about a little bit. As you're passing through the target, is there a risk of being too far behind it? Okay. Is there a risk of being too close to it where you don't generate enough speed to get there? And then how does that relate? It seems to me that when you fire, the speed of the gun and the speed of the bird are not that far apart at the end, like as you sync up with the clay. So I guess my questions are, how far behind should the gun be, or what's the risk? Is it something that you plan, or is it more instinctive? And obviously it must be some form of a feel shooting at the highest level that I imagine when you fire, the target slows down to you and it doesn't feel like 1,000,000 miles an hour. So let's just talk about that a little bit. Anything that you could share with us?
I think for a start, just going back one more question. I know Dan was your first coach, and when I was growing up, he was one of my heroes. So I can understand
the guy's got a great. He shot in the Olympics for skeet and trap.
Yeah.
He won a world championship in skeet and trap.
Yeah.
In Olympic disciplines, international skeet. So the guy can shoot.
No question. And the inaugural sporting side of the US, he was
there,
very high up there.
Yep.
So, I've got a huge amount of time for Dan, and think the world of his achievements and that sort of thing. And look, following on from where you said, over home we had a lot of different people coaching different things.
Even back, in the 80s and 90s.
John Bidwell, when he came to the fore, and he won his world championship in '96 at Goodwood, and then brought out move, mount, shoot method.
Yeah. Would you agree that move, mount, shoot method that he came out with, which became widely known throughout the world? He wrote a book, or somebody helped him write a book. Mainly a maintain lead method.
Well, I think it was more spot shooting.
Okay.
I think it was more spot shooting. I think he was picking a spot in the sky,
just making a smooth gun mount, and
absolutely, and
low gun method with a smooth gun mount and firing.
Yeah, and look, it works for him, but I wouldn't say it would work for everybody, because you've got to understand where that spot in the sky is before you can start going there.
Yeah.
The other method that was widely taught in the UK was the Stanbury method, which was basically shooting stuff off your front foot and swiveling with one foot,
keeping your back foot not planted, like up in the air.
No, and swiveling off that and turning, but then that causes faults where you drop in your shoulder.
Now, did that start off with clay shooting, or was that started in bird shooting?
It started off in tuition for bird shooting.
Okay.
And Percy Stanbury was the foremost, widely recognised shot that Great Britain produced. He won the British Championship countless times, and had the West London shooting. He was an instructor at the West London Shooting School.
Gotcha.
And that's where the Stanbury method came from. And lots of other people.
Was the method addressing the target in that method from in front, behind, or it was more about form?
I think it was more about generating your line. So if the target, when you were shooting a driven bird, if it was straight, you shot it straight, but you shot it off your front foot. Now, I can never get my head round the fact that you have to go forward to come back.
Gotcha.
Why not stand on your back foot and push your hip to the bird, when naturally your shoulders remain square?
Gotcha.
And you come back to the target?
Yep.
So that, for me, I never took that on. But if you watch the likes of Barry Simpson, you watch the likes of Duncan Lawton, you watch the likes of AJ Smith, the majority of those shooters came to the targets from behind.
Gotcha.
They might not have been that far behind them when they started, but it was all swing through. And I was cherry picking most of it. And I thought, well, if the best of the best are using it, why would you not try and shoot it? And the next thing I will say is, I'm always a massive advocate in, we should, as shooters, have some dramatic relationship with what we're shooting at. If I gave you a rifle and I said, Anthony, go out there and shoot me a deer, you wouldn't shoot 2 foot in front of the deer, hoping that at that point it's going to walk forward and walk into the bullet, would you?
Right.
You'd shoot at it.
Yep.
If I said to you, let's go and shoot a pigeon, okay, you are going to shoot, if it's coming over you, a dove coming over you, not very high, not very fast, you're not going to shoot a massive gap in front of it, hoping that the dove is going to speed up, fly into the gap. You shoot at the object.
So the object is your reference for speed, and the object is your reference for line, everything.
Pulling the trigger as you get to that point. So if you look at the leading edge of the target, of whatever you're shooting, you look at that leading edge, and your gun's coming through it. I think a lot of where it looks like there's deceleration is the fact that I've actually locked on with hard focus, actually at the object. So if I'm going slightly too fast,
When do you feel like you really start looking hard at the bird? When you get
well, I'm
to
coming
it?
to the back of it, probably
Just before you
a
get to the
foot and a
clay?
half, 2 foot out
Any
from the
certain
back,
distance that you want to be behind the bird when you start with it, or
whichever makes you feel comfortable.
make the speed has to be in sync? Can't feel fast. Would you say that that's a fair? It can't feel.
Absolutely, but of all we're talking about, everything has to be smooth.
Okay.
Your whole setup, your body position, the way you mount your gun, everything has to be smooth, and that is a realization of understanding your timing. So you're coming through the target. As you come up to the back of it, you go into hard focus, and your hard focus is on the bottom front edge. Now, if it's a quartering bird, you might be on the bottom left-hand front edge, quartering the other way, bottom right-hand front edge.
So you kind of always look at the part of the clay where he's going.
Where it's going, that segment where it's going, that segment you want to be putting your shot in front of, so it flies into it.
Gotcha.
So
if you saw the circle in the middle that was predominant, you would still look to the front right corner or left corner, not the middle.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I almost guarantee you'll miss it behind.
Gotcha.
Because your focus does not get your eyes and the gun far enough in front of the target.
Gotcha.
But so it might appear to decelerate, but you've got to get to that leading edge as you're coming through it. But you've got a relationship with the target. The relationship with the target comes from coming through from behind. You're actually shooting on the front edge of the target, and all right, you might be slowing your swing down as has become apparent in the footage that we've got. But for me, it's because
it's not really, to me, it's not slowing down in the sense that it's moving slower than the bird. No. It's slowing down in the sense that at the very last moment, it seems that you've gotten to your position or the required lead in front of the target, and things for a fraction of a second like hang together.
Yeah.
Like that's where maybe the eyes are doing their final work, so
Absolutely.
to speak. You know.
And I think that's where you get that relationship from. They always say when you're playing golf, look at the back of the ball. You don't look at the ball, you look at the back of the ball. You're hitting a tennis shot, you're watching the ball onto the racket. It's no different to a clay shot.
So
you're letting your eyes go to that front edge of the target where the shot's got to be. There's no point looking at the back edge of the target. No point in looking at the middle of the target. We've got to look at that front edge where it's flying to, get there, coming through it behind, you're on the right line, squeeze the trigger and deal with the shot.
So clarifying kind of two questions then. The distance that you're behind the bird is such to engage the clay that it keeps you smooth and it doesn't feel fast.
You're not rushed.
Doesn't feel fast or erratic. So theoretically, if you held the gun right on the trap and the bird flew way past you, it could feel too fast. And that was, I think, the risk of why I was taught not to be behind the bird, but that's really not what you do and not what you're advocating.
Yeah.
So the distance behind the bird does matter to the point of still feeling smooth and in sync. And then I guess the question of clarifying the rate that you want to come from, the speed of which you come through the bird is really a little faster than the bird to get to the position in front of the bird that you need to go to, which can come up to a new topic that we'll talk about, later on, or in one of your instructional videos that you're doing separately. But some people, there's a whole topic about lead, right? And how do I lead a target? And obviously the gun speed moving through helps you lead it, but we'll get into that later because that's a kind of a bag of worms that, when we talk about lead, it's a major discussion, but it's a simple idea, and if you're worried so much about lead, you're not going to shoot as well as you're capable of, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
But as a novice, they don't understand a lot about leads, so they might need some guidance of what they pay attention to or how they do that, or maybe they just need a way to go out and practice so they learn it. And I think that's probably a lot of how the best shooters have understood lead is through experience.
No question.
Anything on that that you want to add in there?
No, I don't think so. I think that also what we talk about when we talk about technique and doing the same thing is all very relevant to light conditions and the discipline you're shooting. Now, for me, I would start tighter into the trap if I was shooting English sporting, and
Because you got the gun higher.
because I got the gun higher, I'm started pre-mounting. I know my mount's good, and for me,
And in your English sporting, is it always in the pocket, or sometimes it's just out?
just out. But,
You know,
but
kinda-
quite often, if it's a fast going away bird,
Definitely in.
why would you not have it in the pocket? Because
Yep.
you're just
Handicapping yourself.
yeah, of course you are. And all I would say is that for me, I find that the faster the bird, the better my movement is with regards to coming through it and being able to keep pace with the target, come through to the front edge, and my focus is the faster it is. So by generating that speed, I would come closer to the trap.
Yep.
But I know that my mount's good, and I know I can shoot it 2 foot out the trap or 200 foot out the trap.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And then light conditions are, you know, you've got to come through from your eyes and your glass. Your choice of glass becomes, but you've got to be very, very careful at that point that you're not lifting your head to see the target.
Gotcha.
Light conditions, you know, in trees, shimmery light, that sort of thing. A lot of faults on whatever method people use come from,
See if they're going to hit it, or
see if
the
they're going to
target,
hit it,
right.
or looking at the target,
Trying to find it.
trying to find that the edge where they need to be on that target, and they lift their head, and the gun naturally drifts over the top.
Gotcha. No, I think that's awesome. Definitely good information for me to understand better what you're doing, but also for other people just to. And look, I think part of all of this is we might have a guy that's listening to this that's been shooting a maintained lead for the last 20 years. Okay, we're not necessarily telling him in this interview or in any of the videos that you have or the video you and I might do together, right? But we're trying to get him to understand his method, understand shooting a little bit better, and maybe there's a place that he uses it.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you'll have someone that has a target that they've always struggled with. Okay, well, if you've always struggled with it, why are you using the same method? Okay, you know, I mean, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So maybe a guy that's very experienced and doesn't want to change everything in his game understands the methodology better to be able to utilize it, you know, to fill a gap in his game, etc.
Yeah.
And I think it's awesome. So Georgia, it was very interesting. Congratulations on just winning the World Championship, World FITES Championship in Hungary a couple weeks ago. Was a great event. Your 28th World Championship was at 11 World FITES titles.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
You know,
I'm
so
sure
remarkably, just by chance, we're doing this video, to do some videos together, and the roundtable here that we're giving away information. And just by chance, the squatting at the World Championship is random, and you and you're on the squad directly in front of me, and 2 of the people on my squad did not show up, so we had a 4-man squad, and the shooters that I was shooting with all shot extremely quick. So I more or less witnessed you throughout the whole competition, minus a few pegs, because by the time we would get done, your squad was just kind of turning on, or maybe they started, but you hadn't shot yet. So I probably watched you shoot 90% of it, which was awesome to get to experience, both from a standpoint of myself learning and bringing up questions that I wanted to ask you. And then turns out that you win the event, and kind of all come together to create some interesting things. Just your thoughts on the event in general before we get into any real specifics and kind of nitty gritty that I want to ask you about.
Look, I love shooting in Hungary. I've done quite a lot of pre-shoot work over there over the last few years. They've had a lot of world and European championships over the last few years because they host the event well. They've got some good course designers over there now. You know, Thomas Jerry, he understands the game. He's got his own shooting ground, and they've also got some great shots there. I mean, himself and Andras Shezahay, look, they are up there with the world's best, and being up there with the world's best, they're going to bring each other on. And Vargas is another good shot out of Hungary. And that competition that Andras has probably started years ago is now developing the country as a nation to shoot well. The event is the second time an event's been held there. They held the European there, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, before pre-COVID, which was a great event. I thought this was a better event. I thought last time the village was quite a long way away and the layouts were a bit dispersed, and this time I felt it was a true event.
Yeah, I personally really enjoyed it. The targets were definitely the best we've seen at a World VTS Championship in quite some time, in my opinion. Assuming that you didn't, as a competitor, you didn't mind the challenge.
Yeah.
There was some big stuff, stuff off of, I don't know how high you think some of those cliffs were, 150 foot, 200 foot?
Yeah, I was going to say, some of them were, borderline 100 meters, I would think,
right.
some of them.
Yeah, so some 200 to 300 foot up stuff with big crossers and et cetera off of big downhill birds. Stuff we don't get to shoot in the U.S. Very often just for the lack of terrain and the venues that we have trying to accommodate a lot of people. We can't travel on terrain like that, especially how prevalent golf carts are, et cetera, here. But it was awesome to see the targets like they were. I'm sure somebody got their feelings hurt here or there, with some challenging birds. But there was nothing that was really unfair. They were all hittable. I think there was a 25 straight on every layout. They're all run at one time, and that tells you something about the birds. If somebody hit them all, they're hittable.
And I also think that, at the end of the day, we have to get away from compact and FITAS being similar disciplines.
Compact being the European version of 5-stand.
Yeah.
Which is...
Well, it's a world version. It's a world version. The fact that the NSCA and the CPSA don't necessarily recognise it because they've got their own versions of that. It is a world discipline, and there is a world championship at it.
Yeah.
And a very well attended world championship. So compact is in my view a great discipline that caters for the masses. It's quick to shoot. It's very easy to shoot. But we can't have compact sporting and a glorified version of that running alongside as FITAS sporting,
right,
being similar disciplines. So it's a Formula One of clay shooting, and we've had over the last few years a glorified version of compact being made into a FITAS championship, and the scores have been won way up in the 190s and a procession of people between 195 and 190. Now look, it doesn't bother me, as I've said before, you can only shoot against the targets that are set at the time.
Somebody's going to win.
But it's a challenge, and it's a championship, and it's a gun down championship, and it should make every aspect of your shooting be found wanting. So from your gun mount through to your feet position to your endurance of a 4-day event, shooting 50 a day, to shooting 80-meter targets, to shooting 8-meter targets. Yep. Every single part of that technicality of your
more
shooting.
Variety, more tests. You're going to see some stuff further and faster than you would see in compact. And
absolutely,
we're happy to see that this year. I know I was, and you were. Very impressive your performance on the particularly, I think, the middle 5 layouts. Okay, the middle 5 layouts, your scores were, if I was going to look at the layout, your scores were 1 better than perfect for 5 layouts in a row, right? It's hard to shoot 1 better than perfect on 1 layout. Never mind 1 better than perfect on 5 layouts in a row in the middle. And that kind of is a great segue into just talking about, our mental game specifically. There's a lot of things that I want to cover with you related to the mental game, and some of that we'll be talking about right here today, and other stuff we might talk about on a future video or something. But the thing that I want to kind of go through with you a little bit is kind of just break down what you're doing based upon what I've seen. So we'll start with FITAS, because that's what I just witnessed you shoot. And let's start with the day of the event, because that's what I've seen. I'm not sure what you've done prior to the event, which we'll get into talking about that, because I think that'll be very important to talk about your mental game overall, because it doesn't start when you get to the parkour, I'm sure. It's got to start before that. But let's say you get to the peg or the parkour or the station in English sporting, and you can kind of tell me what's different in sporting than FITAS if you do something different. But what I witness you do is something that's different than what I witness most people do, and I've witnessed you do this before in a lot of shoot-offs, super finals, etc. Is you always walk right up, you view all the birds with the squad, okay? You're paying a lot of attention from what I can see, you know, and really looking at what's going on. You know, you seem pretty intense at that moment. When the person steps up to shoot, assuming you're not next, you go back and sit on your stool, or I assume if it was at an event that had a bench, maybe you just sit on the bench, or if you didn't have your own stool, or if it was in the US, maybe it would be you'd sit on your golf cart if that's what you had. But you go back and you always stand to the right of the peg. You stand about anywhere from 6 to 10 yards from the peg to the back right side. And you then get up off your stool and get ready to go up and stand there and get ready to go into the peg when looks like when the person who is 2 shooters in front of you is finishing and about to walk out, and the person in front of you is about to walk in. That's when you move up there. So you're standing there and watching them shoot their first single or their first pair if it's the pairs. I guess my questions are, when you first walk up and you're viewing birds and you're up there with the group before you go back kind of to, you know, and sit by yourself for a moment, I assume that that's when you're recognizing angle, speed, distance, trying to judge the distance of the targets. Talk to me about a little bit what you're doing when you're standing there viewing birds, you know, and I'm sure some of it comes to you naturally because you've been doing it a long time, but I've been around you enough. You're a fairly calculated and a smart, quick guy, so I feel like you're seeing the bird and something comes to your mind and maybe you formulate a plan and you check the box. I'm not sure, but that's the type of thing I'm kind of trying to get out of you, you know, for everyone else and for myself.
So are we basing this part of the conversation on FITAS or
well,
overall?
Let's start with FITAS and I'm going to ask you how it's different afterwards.
Okay.
Let's do FITAS.
So for FITAS, one, very observative in the fact of, you know, my setup is, I try and get my setup exactly the same every time.
Yep.
So I am to the right of the cage if I can be.
Yep.
Sometimes prohibitive stands you can't.
Goes off a cliff or something.
Then you have to go with the flow. It's a discipline, and it's a discipline just the same.
The beginning of, say, routine.
Everything is, yeah. So as long as I've got that bit sorted, I know I'm okay. Then I come up, and the first thing I do is I look at the doubles.
Before you even look at the menu.
Before I even look at the menu, look at the singles, I look straight at the doubles.
Just to see what...
Have I got any RAFs? Have I got any sims? Am I going to be shooting a target in a different place to where I would shoot a single?
Okay.
So if you've got a RAF or a...
Raphael being a following pair.
Yeah, following pair.
Yep.
Or a simultaneous pair.
Yep.
I could be shooting one of the targets in a completely different position to where I shoot it in the singles.
So you want to know that before you even view the singles?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So then I look at the singles, and I look at the single from the moment I can see it to the moment it hits the ground. And in that context, I want to see how far the clay's flying for speed.
Okay.
Because a long clay might not be going that far.
Yeah.
When it wouldn't require much gun movement, or a long clay could be going a hell of a long way, and the point in process would be the game ball layout, the Batu.
Yeah.
The Batu on that layout was a ridiculous target anyway.
Yeah.
But when you saw how far it went, it made it even more ridiculous because
you knew how fast it was.
There was no way you were ever going to be in front of it.
Right.
You just physically.
Can't
At
get
90 metres
right.
and travelling 180 metres, there's no way you could be.
Yep.
So you look at all those things, and then you go back down and you digest the menu. So if you've got to shoot a Raphael double or a simultaneous double in a different position, do you look at that target and try and shoot it in your doubles position as a single?
Is it worth that risk or
absolutely.
not?
and you look at the risk factor involved in that. And then once you've looked at the risk factor involved in that, you make a decision and you stick with it.
Okay, and you're making that decision while you're still up there at the peg, or sometimes you
I
decide
make
when you
that
go back
decision
to
when
your
I
stool.
sit back down and I'm out of the box, and I can make a clearer
Kind of watching
decision.
the birds,
Yeah.
taking into account the information that you gathered up there with a little bit of reminder of which target it was. And
Absolutely.
so, George, when you back on your stool, you're making your final decisions there. So in other words, you've
100%.
I guess occasionally if it's a basic bird, when you're up viewing the birds, you make a final decision right away, or you always feel like you go back over them again, back at your whether it be your golf cart if you had one, or a bench, or we mentioned your stool and how you position yourself with routine.
You're in your place.
Okay.
And that place is a place where I'm always looking up the side of the shooter, trying to look up the side of the shooter, not through the shooter, to view the targets. And very occasionally I'll get back up if I'm concerned about a target that I feel as though I might have misread by looking at the first two, or I haven't quite 100% got the exact point where I'm viewing the target, where it's coming from, where I can first see it, or I've looked at a target and the target appears there, but if I get up and I look really hard, can I see it a bit further back, just to give myself a little bit more time? So that would be the only times I move off the stool, and then I'm coming in one behind the shooter in front of me, so that I'm not stood there, worried about targets and having an opportunity of my mind allowing me to change my thought process.
I assume from what you're saying, you're very much, by the time you sit back down there and before you walk up, you're 100% committed to what you're doing, even if it happened to be wrong. Right?
Without question. And you've got to commit to it,
right?
Whether it's right or wrong. And quite often through my career, I've blanked stands, completely blanked them with zeros, because I'm so committed to what I've done.
Right. You thought it was right and it wasn't.
Yeah.
Right?
But then in the same context, that philosophy has made me kill more tens than has done blanks.
Yep.
And you've got to be prepared. There isn't a person alive that doesn't miss. It's just how often you limit the misses to.
Right.
So for me, I back myself. I back myself in everything I do in that quarter, and I just go out and I let the rest of it take care of itself.
So let's kind of go from there. You've taken us through the planning part, the gathering the information part. You step into the ring, and you now have routine. Setting your feet, getting ready, wherever you're going to look for the bird, loading your gun. I noticed that if you kill a single with the first shot, you take the shot out of the top barrel and you put it in the bottom barrel.
Discipline.
Okay, so that's just more discipline than anything.
Discipline.
Has no actual bearance on
nothing whatsoever.
On what's going on. So
it just means for me,
it's where somebody might say
it's the next shot. So I've put two in, I've killed the first target.
This is the one supposed to be up next.
That's the one that's up next.
Yep.
So just discipline.
Yep.
Why does and I hark back to Pete Sampras, serve an ace and then get that ball thrown all the way back to the far end of the court, and he serves with it the next shot because he's just had an ace with it.
Right, that's what he wants to do.
So, and that's exactly right.
So, routine for you in the box. Take us through like what goes through your mind, what doesn't go through your mind. Is your mind on, when you and I are going to do a mental game comparison video, I'm going to talk about my mental game in detail, and we'll kind of compare what we do different, right? But, what do we do the same? What do we do different? You step into the box, are you thinking about nothing? Are you thinking positive? Are you thinking about killing the bird? Are you thinking about the most basic steps, like put the shell in? People say, well, clear your mind. I hear people say that often. Personally, that's a little bit difficult to do, or be in the zone. Sometimes that's difficult to do.
And what is the zone?
When you won the World Championship 2 weeks ago, your last layout, I wouldn't say you were in the zone, but you did whatever you needed to do in your mind to win. Okay, so I guess kind
I
of.
would disagree with that. I would
Okay.
disagree with that in the fact of I was in the zone, but I knew that having shot 25 straight on my first round, that I was right there.
Right.
And I haven't been in that position. All right, take the World English out of it.
Yep.
I haven't been in that position since the robbery in 2016.
Gotcha.
And when you've got a certain reputation, as I have had, and have built up over a period of time, not in a big-headed manner, but it's just circumstances happened.
Yep.
And when you win the titles, you do it happens. For me, it's a big thing to get back on there and win again.
Right.
So
You wanted it.
I would say I was 100% focused, but that monkey on your shoulder.
Yeah, so what I would say is when I watched you shoot the first layout on the last day, you shot 25 straight on a good layout. I mean, I shot 23. Should have hit one more. You know, running it would have been tough. As a comparison, Zach Kienbaum was on the squad in front of a couple squads ahead of you. He shot maybe 20 on that layout, right? With less pressure than you because he was further out of it. So he shoots a 20, I shoot a 23. You're going out there to win that day, you shoot 25. Then on that first layout, so you're really watching you're really in the zone, you're killing everything. You know, now the monkey shows up on your back a little bit. Now, kind of to your point, this idea of a zone is, you know, a little bit difficult to
well, I think you're still in it,
Yep.
but to remain within it completely without making mistakes. When you're in the zone and it doesn't matter, the ability to make mistakes, and when I say an ability to make mistakes, is almost non-existent because you don't care.
Right, just happens.
When it cares, that mistake process becomes bigger and longer.
There's more things
and
that you
more
doubt and question.
Of course you do. And so instead of just going on and shooting, which I'd done for the previous 3 days or 2 days, all of a sudden I started to try and defend something that I hadn't got.
Trying not to miss, trying to keep the score.
And, you know, it was very interestingly, when we started the competition, I was 88th after the first day.
Mm-hmm.
I shot 43 out of 50. You saw me shoot most of it. It was very poor. And of the 43 out of 50, I missed 5 singles. And you cannot afford to miss 5 singles at that level of competition, shooting both shots at each target.
Right.
You just can't.
Somebody's going to do it. Somebody's going to hit them.
And for me, I got in the car that night and I travelled with Kate came, which is fantastic, you know, and she does so much for me. That's it's a huge thing for me for Kate to do, with what she's done for me coming over here and everything else. It takes a huge amount off my mind that she's doing that for me. It's like having a manager, and that's brilliant. And then when I travel in Europe, I try and travel with 2 very, very close friends of mine, one from Slovakia called Norbert Horvath and Horatio Bornet from Romania. And they're 2 great guys. And they're, both good shots in their own right, but probably not quite at the top of their game, but they understand it. And we don't have to talk about shooting. We can talk about farming. Hurry is in the meat business and egg business as well, so I can relate to him and we talk about different things. Doesn't have to be shooting. And I got in the car that night and I said to him, I don't care if I shoot 38 tomorrow. I've just got to eradicate missing singles. And from that point on, I missed 2 more singles in the rest of the competition.
Right.
And by eradicating missing the singles, the doubles take care of themselves.
All right, now you're more confident going into the doubles. So back to when you step into that ring, besides we have simple steps that we follow, like load the gun, set your feet. I watch you do those things, so obviously you do those things at your level and experience, some of those things kind of happen naturally, that
Yeah.
you kind of already planned it outside the box, and you step
Yeah.
in, you kind of know where your visual pickup point is, or your look point. You've determined, the distance and speed of the bird, so that's all planned and done. So what actually do you feel like, is your mind blank? Is it on certain things? Are you ever talking to yourself, like self-talk? Are you ever trying to just focus on the steps of, like, putting the focus on the steps of the process? What do you go pretty quick, and you're kind of instinctive.
And that's just what I was going to say. To me, if I go on that stand and I've read that stand and I've gone and sat straight down, in my mind's eye, I feel as though I can get them all.
Okay.
And as soon as I feel as though I can get them all, and I haven't got to worry about a certain target, I will shoot those 4 singles or 3 singles, however it may be, as quick as I possibly can. Well, there's no point in being in there. You may just as well put a cartridge in the gun, call for the target, and kill it.
Right.
And exactly the same would be said if you watch back the World English video from last year.
From the shoot-off.
From the shoot-off.
Yep, that was what I was referencing earlier, that you kind of stepped back on the bench and stepped in there and killed them all and whooped everybody.
Within the same amount of time that certain people in the final were shooting 1 or 2 pairs.
They shot 1 pair and you shot 4.
Yeah.
And they hit 4 birds and you hit 8.
So that's what I'm saying. Once you feel as though you can get them.
So your routine is fairly short, and then that keeps your conscious mind kind of out of it.
Yeah.
And you've already you've planned consciously and got that out of your conscious mind, so that it's becoming much more instinctive, reactive.
Yep.
And your routine is just basically a couple simple steps, and your mind is rarely on anything, in the box.
But then if I've got a target or a couple of targets on the stand that I'm slightly nervous of,
okay,
then I will slow it down, and I will try and remember, because it's very easy when you're shooting fast.
You get ahead of yourself.
To get ahead of yourself and just remain on soft focus. So when you get to those real hard targets, you've got to go to hard focus, and this is it's something that I don't know whether you want to talk about it now, but it seems quite a good time to talk about it. Is when you came to the UK. You came to the UK 4 or 5 weeks before we had the World English.
Yeah, we were there like the first week of June 2023.
Yeah, so
second week of June 2023.
Yeah, so you're second week of June, so it's literally 4 weeks ahead of both of these, the events, and I shot with you, and I saw, we
were filming and trying to capture footage to see what we were going to be talking about and get to know more about each other's style, etc.
And you said to me about, you don't seem to be focusing as hard on the target as perhaps you could be.
Yeah, I think the context was there was a basic crossing bird, and we were trying to capture it on film, and you weren't shooting it as good as you should be, right?
Yeah.
For the lack of better explanation. And you said, "What do you see?" I said, "Well, it doesn't look like you're doing much different than what you've been doing on a number of other stands that we shot together. I'm not an expert in watching your technique and exactly what you're doing, because we just started earlier that day. But to me, it looks like the difference between your hit and the miss is just you're not looking at the bird, and that's kind of, I guess, what you're referencing."
Yeah, and then from that moment on, I don't think I missed another target on that stand.
Right.
And going forward for a few stands. And I got home after we'd had our couple of 3 days, and I thought, do you know what? This is something where I've been lacking.
Simple as it sounds. To me, it's the hardest part of the game.
Yeah.
You and I mentioned, even when we were over there in England, we were talking about Dan Carlisle, and he taught me to shoot, whatever. Yeah. That's the thing he would always pound into me, looking at the bird, looking at the bird, looking at the bird. And then you and I talked about that a little bit. And I know within my routine, when I'm in the cage, most of the time there's some intensity related to, if there's anything on my mind, it's amping up myself to see the front edge of the bird, or the leading edge, like you called it, and prepping myself for that. And if I remember correctly, our conversation was that you have always looked at the target, and you've always believed in a hard focus on the target, but it's kind of been something that your soft focus, the hard focus, has been when you're, I guess, especially when you're shooting at your highest level, kind of the hard focus part just kind of happened.
Yeah.
You know, as you come through the shot and come through the bird, it would be, you're looking at the bird because where else would you be looking, right?
Yeah.
But I guess then what you're saying is maybe as of recently you weren't doing that as good as you could have been. Something happened, right?
I think, and I don't want to keep harping back to it, but the robbery in 2016 was a big thing for Kate and I. You know, you have your home broken into and everything else, and it's been well documented, and I've said it before that I was trying to prove since then to everybody that I can still do it.
Right.
And I think that
added pressure.
Yeah, but one is added pressure, but two, also I think that because I was actually just still shooting. I mean, I took a massive blow through here with a 4.5 pound club hammer. If it had been an inch lower, I wouldn't have been shooting.
Yeah.
If it had been there, I probably wouldn't have been alive.
Right.
So I've been very lucky in itself that I'm still here.
Yeah.
And to go out and shoot, and then have to go that extra mile to hard focus. I think what I've actually done is I've tried to do it and tried to prove to everybody just on soft focus alone. And I'd actually probably forgotten about how hard you need to focus.
You need to be working
on that. So then we did our 2 or 3 days. You flew home. Chris stayed on.
Yep.
And then Chris wanted to come and film me in sort of competition mode over there on a Sunday, and we did a couple of shoots over there on the Sunday, and the transformation between where I'd been before to that point by utilising getting my hard focus back was like chalk and cheese to me, and it was just like someone had flicked that switch again. And then from then on my scores were really good. I won 2 or 3 shoots, was competing at other shoots, really felt that I was back up there, and I felt that I really fancied a good showing at Churchill's, and for whatever reason I fell by the wayside. I had 2 bad stands in 28.
Same as me.
And I missed 4 on both stands. Those 8 targets puts you in the final.
Yep.
And on targets that I shouldn't have missed either. Just for some reason it happened, and that's sport. It's a great leveler. But from that moment when I saw you and you'd said what you said to me, to now, the where I've been going wrong over the last 4 or 5 years. Not going wrong.
It's sometimes you don't even realize it's a subtle difference, and you don't realize a subtle difference.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the question is, so occasionally when you're shooting in Hungary, then when you get to that tougher bird, you're kind of amping yourself up a little bit, or have some type of a mental reminder to make sure you're watching the clay or seeing the front edge. Is that basically what you're...
Absolutely. And also, the more you break, the more confident you get.
So then the watching the clay gets a little easier.
And then
would you agree
if
with
you
that?
come off stand 1, you've only got 3 to go.
Right.
Come off stand 2, you've only got 2 to go. And all of a sudden, your positives start stacking up against your negatives.
Yep.
When you start the layout, you've got 4 stands to miss
and
on.
You're down 1 already or something, you're in trouble.
So you've only got 3 to miss on.
Yep.
So, and I'd shot earlier in the year. They had a Jering club. They had a 200 bird compact on Wednesday and Thursday, and then Friday they reset for the Fitask and shot Fitask on Saturday, Sunday. I went over for both competitions. Shot the compact, shot okay. On Friday, went out with the boys. We went to Budapest. We had a fantastic meal, Japanese restaurant. Had a lovely day, nice relaxing day. And on the following Saturday, I got up, first round of a World Cup Grand Prix event, everybody there, and I shot 99. And should have killed 100 straight. I mean, you say you should have killed 100 straight, but I've missed a target, both barrels as a single on my last round, that I've then killed in the double.
Yep.
So I should have effectively, I should have had it. And at that point, I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, I can do this again.
Yep.
And your hard focus comes back. And, you know, as I say, in my view, a lot of what I feel as though I've been lacking over the last few years has come back now, just with that added focus at the last minute. And
on you generally say the leading edge.
Yeah. And that's
so you've added a little bit of that back into your routine just to make sure that you're watching the bird and not something else.
Absolutely.
You know, I guess a question would be, go back to a year like, say, 2015 when you won everything, right? You feel like that, for you feel like that hard focus in a moment like that was just kind of natural, just kind of happening, or maybe you were working harder at it and didn't realize it, or it's even hard to say?
I think it becomes a something that gets out of control.
Okay.
So, you know, we started off in 15, South Florida, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a ridiculously hard layout
Yep.
to start with. And I shot something, I can't remember the exact score, it was something like 93 or 94.
Yeah, you're like 10 ahead of everybody going into the final.
Yeah, and all of a sudden you begin the momentum begins to build. And then you take that momentum into the World FitAsk and you win the World FitAsk. And then I take it to the World Compact in Estonia, and I missed my 5th target out and shot 199. But because of what I've achieved before, it seems so easy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And
when it
it
feels
is not easy.
So here's, so when it feels easy, watching the bird's easy.
Of course
Would you
it
agree
is.
with that?
And you are hard focusing at that point.
Because you don't have, in my opinion,
subconsciously.
Yeah, because you don't have anywhere else. You don't have anything else to do.
No.
Okay, you're not worried about how far in front you need to be. You're not worried about anything.
Absolutely.
You're going off of your plan and then letting that happen. Very good, very interesting. You know, you and I will compare some things as we go through mine, because there's things that we definitely have done very similar, things we've done definitely different. You know, it's kind of, for me, it's kind of exciting for me to learn myself. Gonna step back one time to the planning part. You're there, you walk up to that peg, and let's also add in English sporting and say, you know, what might happen different in English sporting, just to, or as most Americans would call it, sporting clays.
Yeah.
When you're there and you're gathering that data of angle, speed, distance, how far the bird flew, is it whatever is happening, you then kind of formulate a plan, which you said when you step back that you want to be confirmed and be stepped in. What details are in that plan? Break point, or you call it like your timing, I believe.
Yeah,
where you're going to shoot it?
I'm looking at timing. I'm looking at...
When you say timing...
As in your timing from the moment you see the target to your gun coming through the target and breaking it.
Okay.
That's timing. But obviously, initially to start with, when I'm shooting English sporting, I'm more confident in shooting FitAsk, because I can actually start with a gun in my shoulder if I want to.
Okay.
So you're taking out that variation of having the gun down. You know, how many quick targets have we missed by going over the top because you've made a slightly bad gun mount at FitAsk that you'd eat all day 10 yards out of the trap when you're shooting English sporting.
For sure.
So for me, I'm taking the gun mount situation out of my game. I know that I've got a good gun mount. I know that I can go right back to the trap, start with a gun in my shoulder and have it 10 yards out of the trap if I need to. So my thought process changes to where is the best place to break that target to give me the opportunity of getting my best shot on the second clay.
Okay.
So then I look at the double in a hole, whether it's on report double, a simultaneous double, or a Raphael double. Where are my gun positions going to be for each one?
Okay.
And I try and break my first target where my gun position is going to be as of much benefit to the second target as is possible.
And I assume that's with some form of calculated risk, that you don't want to shoot the first one to get the best gun position if you make it significantly harder, for example. You feel confident in it.
And also as well with my feet position would be in a position where I would set for the harder of the two targets.
Okay. So you'd be a little out of position on the soft one if you need to.
Absolutely. But that body rotation comes with trying to break the hard target.
Gotcha. Now, since we're, we won't get into it too much, but since we're on the planning phase, say for example, when I'm viewing the birds, if I put my hand up and kind of track the target, I'm using that to a degree to kind of get an idea of like where my gun would go, like what the, whether my insertion point is behind it or in front of it. In your case, your insertion point is almost always behind the bird, so that's easy. So theoretically, you got less to worry about because you know where your gun's going to start behind it. Do you have any indication, and I guess I'll ask a follow-up question, do you have any indication in your planning of like lead that's going to take a lot, or that's going to take a little, or that's like a shoot right at it, And I guess my question is, because I know a lot of guys sitting at the house, would say, well, geez, if he's planning and he looked at the angle, speed, and distance, that must matter for the scientific part of the shot. Does he get himself ready by saying something to himself, visualizing something, using his hand? I don't really see you put your hand up much. Right?
Very rarely. I use my eyes.
Okay.
And my visual calculation on speed comes from experience, and as I said to you before, the biggest thing I use is how far that clay's thrown.
Yep.
And to me, if you get a clay that's thrown on a wound up trainer spring, it's going to go 50 meters.
Yep.
I know that I haven't got to put huge amounts of gun speed into that because I can kill it anywhere. And if I want to steady myself down, I can put my hand slightly further down the forend. If I've got a normal, a normal spring throwing an 80-meter target, then I know that my timing needs to be for a mid-range target. If it's quartering, I'm going to back it off a little bit. If it's crossing, I know roughly my timing for that sort of target. And then for a super sporter at range, you're throwing the biggest spring you
something
can get
really
at
fast.
range. Something, then I know that I'm going to have to get wound right in, and my speed is going to be relative to the speed of the target coming through it. I can accelerate my speed by bringing my hand slightly further back on the action,
Yep.
which increases your gun speed. But I'm doing it all from my eyes on the distance of how far the target goes.
So you've
when
kind
it's
of
thrown.
viewed the birds. You're not really using your hand. You've viewed the birds. You've calculated all the variables, and you're, not to put words in your mouth, but you're giving it some consideration for how you're going to have to or not have to get in front very far, and using basically the amount of that you pull through the bird. And if the bird's faster and takes further in front, you're going to have to move a little faster to get out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's not a calculated lead in your mind that's a spatial relationship, but there's kind of an acknowledgement in your planning phase of, for lack of better explanation, a relative scale, or this is a little, I'm going to pull through a little, or I'm going to have to pull through. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%.
I guess another way to say it is, hey, Joe Blow over here, George wants you to help him understand how he has to get a plan to lead these different birds, and he hasn't shot nearly as much as you. Should he not worry about lead at all, or should he take some consideration? I think your answer would be, you better take some consideration. Right?
Yeah, but it's
a hard thing to quantify. It's a hard thing to explain.
One interesting thing I would say is as well, and it came from when you came to the UK, and you and I both discussed it. It was the fact that when I shot a high gun on a quartering target, and basically we filmed quite a lot of targets shot at Barbie shooting ground. Some great targets. They put on some brilliant targets for us. Fantastic facility, and we shot the targets there. And you said to me that when you shoot English sporting style, I'm a hell of a lot smoother than when I shot the targets gun down.
Right.
Because, as I've said to you, the gun mount's already taken care of, and all I've got to be done then is be smooth to the target. Whereas my gun speed was twice as fast,
Especially it
gunned down.
was a fast quartering bird.
Fast quartering bird. You remember it?
Yep, off the left side of green bird.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of a sudden, I thought, well, it doesn't need to be any different at all. But for some reason, you think that from there to there to there has got to be a lot quicker movement,
faster.
and it's not. So that was one thing that brought it down to me. And shooting my Fitask in Hungary as well, on those quick quartering birds, I made a conscious effort to slow down even.
Most of that in your planning, or even sometimes when you're in the box?
In my planning before I went.
Like, I'm going to
make a conscious effort, just be smooth
here in my plan.
Yeah.
More time than I think.
Absolutely.
Right. Don't get out of sync too.
Absolutely.
Don't be moving the gun faster than you need to.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, back to our discussion about swing through. It doesn't mean it's erratic.
No.
Doesn't mean it's doesn't mean it's significantly faster than the bird. It's faster than the bird, but not out of control.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So that kind of goes through, just in my mind, just doing a mental checklist, we kind of go through planning the station, viewing the birds, planning the station, what I call rehearsing when you're standing back. Sporting, you would be doing similar things, but you're a little more relaxed. You said you got more view birds, you got a gun up, you only got 2 birds to worry about.
You got 2 birds to worry about, and you're replicating those 2 birds 4 times.
So you do essentially the same thing, but you're, let's say, you're less concerned about the details of everything coming together because you got more opportunity.
And also a very interesting point as well is that I mentioned earlier on in the piece about being the best 9 man in the country and having a problem keep shooting 9s and missing the last bird. One thing I've taught myself with English sporting, or sporting clays as you would call it, is if I'm slightly struggling with my timing and I'm not breaking them quite as I want to, like, I mean, we all want to see clouds of soot everywhere we shoot.
Yeah.
But sometimes your timing's just not quite there, and
happening.
You're fringing the bird, or still breaking, but fringing and whatever. And so that I don't run into the fact that I'm shooting a 9, as it comes to that last pair, I'll try and shoot the last pair a yard quicker.
So you don't get
a
careful
yard
or
quicker
drag it too long.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't get dragged into that.
Get amped up a little bit and just go for it.
Yeah.
A little more trust in it.
Yeah. And you very often find that all of a sudden your timing then comes straight back.
Right. You actually probably ended up at a good spot because your brain wanted to drag you out longer and get careful or measure or check it or something like that. No, that's awesome. As we conclude our roundtable interview with George Digweed, it's been a great time. I've learned a lot. I hope everyone listening has learned a lot. We set out with the goal to really dig into what this guy knows and what we can get from him, what we can learn from him. We learned just his history. We learned about the World Championship that he recently won in Hungary. It's been really interesting. We're going to even dive deeper and pull out things in the videos that George is here working on. We're doing a foundation video and an advanced video. And the one I'm really excited about is the video that George and I are doing together, comparing our mental games and comparing about 5 basic shots that you see on every sporting clay course. And we're not really going to tell you which method is better, but we're going to show you how we're doing things and what the advantages and disadvantages to each method, and really allow you to kind of watch that footage. And we've got some really great graphics and stuff coming out for you that is going to help everybody really take their shooting even to another level. George, thank you for being here doing this with me.
No, thank you very much for having me. And I've already, during the time we've been filming, I've already learnt a lot off you, and I put some of that down definitely to me winning the World Championships in Hungary, just getting me back on my focus, where I probably haven't been over the last few years, and I couldn't have thought of anybody I'd rather do this with than you. At the end of the day, it's probably going to be my last hurrah on giving out information, and I just want to try and give to everybody everything that I've learned.
Yeah, I mean, the part that I said to my partner Chris and said to you when we put this together, I said, somebody's got to interview this guy and get all his information and ask him the right questions, because he's the greatest to ever do it, and we want it to be there forever. We want it to document. We want everybody to be able to learn for it, and I appreciate you taking the time and giving me the opportunity to kind of open that up for everyone out there.
My pleasure.
I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the information that we got from George Digweed as much as I did. A lot of great content. Really spent my life doing this, and the more information I can get, the better job that I can provide out on the range and shooting myself. We have some great videos coming out. George creating 2 videos, Foundation and Advanced, and the video that George and I are working on here together is going to be a mental game and shots comparison, where we compare ourselves to each other, and we're going to really break it down and go through some interesting things and hopefully provide you all some more content that you really love. We would like you to go to claytargetinstruction.com, claytargetinstruction.com, and you can learn more information about George Digweed's video. We wish you the best of luck in your shooting. Break them all.